Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
How should I call you? Meta or Arturo?
Is that how you really speak?
Yes.
Uh,
Is that going to be difficult for you?
I mean, okay, if you're sincere, I mean,
You
yes.
think I'm putting it on?
It's I don't know. Maybe I'm not used to it. It's a little over the top, it seems, from my point of view.
All right. If you have difficulty, if you can't talk to
Well, you're
me
from the
because you
UK,
don't
right?
like the way I talk.
Wait a minute. You're from the UK, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. Never mind. I thought you were American for a second. I forgot. Yeah, you're Greenwich time. Sorry. Okay, no, I have no. Sorry. If you're from the UK, it makes sense.
Yeah. I heard you yesterday on Alexander Selkirk's stream space talking about. Actually, it was quite late. It was about 3 or 4 o'clock my time. But my memory was that you were saying something and the others were disagreeing with you. I don't know
It
if
was
you.
quite the ordeal.
Pardon?
It was quite the ordeal.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't understand. What did you say?
No, I said it was quite the ordeal.
Oh, it was an ordeal for you, and they didn't agree with you.
Yes.
So basically, Alexander Selkirk talks about leaving America, and he's saying America is not worth remaining in, and he's living outside America. But you're saying the opposite. Is that right?
I mean, again, I'm not forcing anyone either way, but I am arguing the opposite, that Americans should stay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And were you born an American?
Yes.
Right. And so basically, the space was full of people who agreed with Alexander Selkirk and disagreed with you.
For the most part.
Mm-hmm.
When I was invited into the space, I made sure that would have been fine. That basically telling them that no, I'm going to disagree with you, and they said, oh, that's fine. So, I'm not the gadfly, but everyone seems, with the exception of a few people, everyone seems genuinely interested,
Mm-hmm.
and in some respects, genteel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a lot of pushback. That's all it was.
Yeah, so I guess a lot of people are not happy with the way things are in America, but you are for some reason. You're doing okay. You think things are fine.
No, I try to draw a resolution from a wellspring that's not dependent on whether it's good, whether the times are good or whether times are bad. So Washington, when he gave up his army in 1783, which in a very selfless and unprecedented act, he basically, in his letter to the Congress, he said that any reason that the people that everything that they have, everything they need now, everything they have with them, that they could use to be happy. So if this is quote, he says, if they be not find happiness, it'll be their fault. Essentially, so he's basically saying that and this was reiterated by Adams, this was reiterated by Jefferson, Madison probably said it as well, and so they gave us everything we need to govern ourselves in a way that should lead to happiness. If we come short of that, it's our fault, not the fault of the system. And so running away to another country is not doing your duty where you're supposed to. I mean, there's a reason why the government pays to educate you. It's not because, it was a nice idea or It was because citizens have to be able to govern and participate in governance in more ways than just voting, and reading and writing is a huge part of that. That's all, you can't do speech otherwise, really. And so that's something that's a duty. And so moving out of the country because things are bad isn't the right thing to do. We have everything we need in this country to change the government the way we want.
Mm-hmm.
A great example of this is after 9/11. So normally the federal government is analogized as a battleship, where if you want to turn a battleship around, it takes a long time, right? Very, very arduous and difficult, and a lot of moving parts.
Yes, it takes a few miles or something to move an oil tank.
I've never seen one turn, but I would imagine, something that big would take a while to turn. But on 9/11, though, we saw the true exercise of popular sovereignty, since the American people basically gave the government carte blanche to say, hey, you can do what you believe is the right thing to do to get these dastardly terrorists. And so you have this a battleship turn a 180 in quicker than the people you see doing 180s on TikTok, like just immediately. And that's because the popular sovereignty was there. The people on all levels were basically in agreement and motivated by the same reasons and the same goal. And so that is the power the public has. Now, most of the time, the public is.
Sorry, what were you talking? What, invading Iraq? Is that what you mean?
No.
You said the public were agreed with the government on something.
Included too, but no, I'm talking about things like the Patriot Act, just all the you see, and the creation of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. Which is basically a mixture of the CIA and the FBI, being a spy agency, domestic spy agency with arresting powers. But that's what they did. I mean, all those things were created overnight after 9/11 for the most part, in a way that normal legislation would have taken, if at all, if it would have passed at all, months or years. And so that just goes to show you how much power there is when the public is aligned on these issues. And so if, certain issues are happening to America and they're so evident, people should be able to agree on them, at least to level of a supermajority, let's say. And that should be able to be enough for all the changes that need to be made, or at least to try. And so if people don't get that done, if nothing is happening or what have that, then it's because either the people don't want it or there's a lot of disagreement about what should be done. And so either or, you got to find a way forward. And if very few people are going to argue, and if the house is on fire, whether to use water to put out the fire. So if there's a relationship between how dire the problem is and whether people agree with a solution. And so the more dire a problem is, the more likely they're going to agree with the solution quickly. And so any solution, any problem that takes a long time to get to a consensus about it is probably not an immediate issue. It's probably not very dire and something that could be put on the shelf for a while. So, the reason why I say optimistic is because there's no reason to get upset or to be despondent. The only thing that worries me is how confident Americans are in themselves and whether they understand the power they hold through their citizenship and the responsibility they have to the world to show that what freedom looks like and be that power of example. But if they don't know that, if they're not taught that, if they can't see the difference between them and any other country, then and I don't mean that. I mean obviously, see when people say when I say America's exceptional, I'm not saying it's supreme. or that it lords over any other country. I'm just saying that in terms of it sticks out, in terms of like if you look at a pattern of history and nation states, and the pattern related to America is just a different pattern, it just sticks out from all the other patterns. And so it's a, you know, exceptionality is just a, you know, it's almost like a geometric you know, designation more than you know, one normative or value one. But yeah.
Right. So may I ask your voting intentions
Oh, of
this
course,
November?
Trump all the way. Trump all the way. Yeah. I voted for him in 2016, in 2020, and I plan on voting for him again.
Do you think the election was stolen in 2020?
I think there were a lot of irregularities that have not been investigated or given the light of day, really. One that is very damning is the fact that several states stopped, you know, and these states that had, you know, contentious, you know, like swing states and stuff, they all stopped counting at the same time, presumably for different reasons. One was, you know, water main break. The other one was, I guess they were tired. I don't know, but a lot of them, you know, stopped at the same time, and which is unprecedented in American history. It's like, you know, wait, if you're tired, just get more people. If there's a water break, just move the ballot somewhere. You know, we've always done that. We've always had it so that usually they finish around, you know, 3 a.m. or something like they did in 2016. But yet they had gone into this like blackout phase, and then right, presumably so in all those states, Trump was leading, and then after that gap, you know, they come back, and then immediately Biden is leading, and there's all these extra ballots. And it's like, and then when they, you know, New York Times posted how like a graph of how many ballots there were over time. And it essentially, you know, had a natural arc. And then immediately at that moment around the blackout, it just goes vertical. I mean, like a slope of one, right? Just straight up, and then goes back to that natural arc, and it goes straight up just enough to go above Trump's arc, and that happened in Michigan and Wisconsin. The Wisconsin one is especially damning, the image of it. But so, you know, there's a lot of these things, and what really got to me the most, would like almost set something off, and this is why I do what I do now, and you know, because I wasn't into this. You know, I wasn't. If you told me this in like 2019 that I would be, you know, doing this kind of like American exceptionalism stuff, I wouldn't believe you. I would say no. I'm finishing my degree in industrial organizational psychology, and I'm going to work for a corporation. Maybe one day I'll get a PhD like I wanted to before. You know, but. Instead, you know, I'm in this way. And what happened was that what triggered me, and if I've written all this down, so this is not, you know, stuff that I'm making up on the fly. I've written this all, you know, in articles and such. Basically, that Supreme Court decision, and I think in late November 2020, 2020, where you had about half the states essentially say, listen, these other states did not follow their own laws. And, you know, especially with regard to the mail-in ballots, that they went around the state legislators and their statutes, and by that standard, it's not that we disagree with the rules they have, but that they didn't follow their own rules. And if you know, they basically argue that there's a responsibility for them to get through the rules, and that it would at least invalidate or put into question these votes. And so I figured what would happen was that they would take the case and then rule it on some technicality. But instead, they didn't take the case. They said, and this is what shocked me, that half of the states in the union had no standing in a federal election. I couldn't believe that. So something went off. I mean, wait, you tell me half the states in the union don't have standing in a case about between states? Are you kidding me? And so it's just that from there, I questioned, what does it mean to take an oath to the Constitution and to defend it against domestic enemies? I mean, what does that mean? And then that's what set me off on where I'm at now.
Do you fear that the election might be stolen again this year?
I think you could only steal it so much. That if Trump wins by a lot, you see, Trump and Biden were neck and neck anyway, just like Hillary. So you can you just need a little bit to push it over. But if there's a 10-point lead or a 20-point lead, it's too difficult to do that. And so the hope is that there's such a value. And look, Trump is the only sitting president in American history to win more, the votes he did on his second term. So not only did he win more votes from his first term on his, so at this, 2020, he had more votes, but he won the most votes for a sitting president in U.S. history. So no other sitting president had as many votes as him. And yet, we're to believe that 75 million votes, which is unprecedented. Obama got like 60. And yet we're to believe that Biden got 81. And look, even if you believe there's a lot of hate towards Trump, and that's just, which is not the way you should run a democracy. You shouldn't run democracy on, I hate the person, so I vote for anyone else like that. That really shouldn't be the case. But even if that were the case, it's still unprecedented that he would get so many more votes. That means more people voted for him. We're talking about, I think he got the first time around like 65 or 62 or something. And so you're looking at as much as 15 million people, additional people voting for Trump the second time around, 2020. So given that trajectory, and now with these indictments and a bunch of people, there are people that I talk to around me that aren't political, that never talked about Mueller, never talked about 2020, too much.
Sorry, what did you say? Mueller? What was that?
No, I said that I know people around me, like in the neighborhood, that are not political at all, that, never said anything about Mueller, never said anything about January 6th, nothing about that.
Sorry, what was Mueller, if you don't mind explaining? You said Mueller? What was that?
What was that?
You said something about Mueller? What
yeah.
Wait,
I'm sorry, you may not be familiar. Yeah, so sorry about that. See, that's my American bias, right? So I'm referring to the Russiagate case with Trump during his like the first 2 or 3 years of his first administration. Basically, there were people in the U.S. attorneys that accused Trump of being a asset of Russia. And so this man named, what's his first name? His last name is Mueller, but I can't remember his first name right now. But basically, Mr. Mueller, they put him as a special counsel. Basically he's like a relic there at the Justice Department, and they put him there. Mueller. Also has a history with 9/11, but that's a footnote.
Sorry, sorry, was this about 9/11 and Mueller?
No, I'm saying that he's related to that he was the director of the FBI during 9/11. In that wake, and so
Mueller was accusing Trump of
as a special counsel to investigate.
Okay.
So he's taking his prosecutorial powers to investigate Trump, to see if they could charge him with being a Russian agent. And I'm not sure if you know, but by 2019, when Mueller finished his report, he basically argued that Trump, there was no evidence that Trump was an asset. But anyway, so what I was saying was there are people in my neighborhood who never knew anything about that. Never knew anything about January 6th. We're not political at all. Who have talked to me, initiated to me about voting for Trump, about this like Trump's mugshot and stuff like that. I mean, so I believe even more people are going to vote for him this time around as well, just like in 20. So that trajectory is going to remain. And so I believe that, given that the case, the margin between the two candidates is going to be so great, or a lot greater, and it's going to be harder for them to and also, I mean, it's going to be really hard for them to pull off the same thing all over again, where they say, "Oh, we have to stop counting for 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the night." I mean, that's going to be really hard pressed, especially with like the same thing. I mean, no one's going to buy that. So, they can only do so much. I really think that doing all they did to Trump in 2020, that Trump would have just said, "You know what, I'm too old for this. It's too much for me." Especially with the indictments and everything, I really think that they didn't expect Trump to keep going. And so, but look, there's one thing that no one talks about with Trump, and this is really important, is that his enemies aren't all on the left. He has secret enemies on the right, like that are coming out of the Heritage Foundation and the secretive Council for National Policy, which some people regard as the CFR of the conservative wing.
What's CFR?
Oh, CFR is the Council on Foreign Relations. It's a group that was started in the 20s, and it was basically, by Rockefeller, and it's basically a think tank or a roundtable group that is.
And they promote what, neoconservatism?
No, they promote more globalism. They go back to the 20s, so they basically are a think tank to come up with what they believe foreign policy should be like, and they've gained a lot of influence over the years, and very, very close with certain people, but their majority, if for lack of a better designation, are left wing. And lean left, or not like conservative, and so in 1981, after Reagan was elected, there was a group of secret conservatives, and they got together to create the Council on National Policy, and so this group is about 200 members, and they meet every year, but the location and general whereabouts and the details of their meetings are never disclosed. So we don't have any pictures from them. All we've had is one leak from 2017 of the attendance of one of the of 2017's conference. And so, this includes people like, Mike Pence, James O'Keefe, from Project Veritas,
Right. What's the difference between? Okay, I know the different organizations, but the American Enterprise Institute, they promote neoconservatism, don't
yes,
they?
yes. So all the neoconservatives are basically co-opted in this group that I'm trying to discuss. That's on the right of Trump, that is basically trying to use Trump as to piggyback off of his power, so that so they could put in like a VP that will then become president or something like that. And they have a thing. The Heritage Foundation has a policy, a platform called Project 2025, and Trump has his own. He has his policy platform is Agenda 47, and I have several Axios articles that discuss how Trump has repeatedly said to the press that he has nothing to do with Project 2025, and he basically is kind of annoyed that the Heritage Foundation and these others, I call them, by the way, I call these neoconservatives, I call them Straussian fascists, because they're very influenced by Leo Strauss and Henry Jaffa, whatever, and they essentially, for them, natural law is not the free exercise of those capacities that all humans or humans in principle are born with, to things like living and and making decisions and all that. No, they believe natural law is basically the legacies of power. Essentially, might makes right. So that the fact that, all these histories have been oligarchies and such, and so there's no problem to keep that going because it's just a fact of life. You see, so it's a completely different view on natural life. Natural rights, and they want to use Trump to basically make the executive branch of the government more autocratic, so less restraints on it from all levels. And ultimately, I believe, and they've said this, people like Peter Thiel are at the helm of this. They want to dissolve the federal government, use that autocratic power at the executive branch to dissolve the federal government, and have it in lieu of it a series of city states, that many of them being ethnically related, and based on an ethnic group. And I believe that's funny. So a bunch of like Singapores essentially, and so this group is the counter to the group on the left of Trump, which is what people call the deep state, which is essentially deep aspects of the administrative state that put a check on presidential power. And so the problem there from them is not checking presidential power. That's a good thing. The problem is when you have a source of a check on presidential power that's not accountable to any democratic institution. So we don't vote in bureaucracies. You can't vote them out really either, because it's their job. They have these civil civil service rights, and so given that's the case, they're not accountable to and they can make these decisions. That's why the State Department was run by a group called the Wise Men, about I think about 7 or 8 men who were basically modern day aristocrats there in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they set the agenda for the State Department, which is essentially the whole foreign policy. That's why Trump was another shockwave, because he disrupted that platform of that's why Bush and Obama had the same or continuous foreign policy. It's because it's the same foreign policy by the same group, the establishment. And they did all this, and this is all admitted in several books. It's just no one talks about it. But Trump comes in and disrupts all that. And so the problem ultimately is that he has, on one level, these deep state left wing types that are trying to lock down the presidency so that the people can never really vote in someone on their own. And that basically, so essentially, to put in some analogy, they want to have industry control the market, not market control industry, essentially, if you want to put it that way.
So that's what the left want? I mean, that sounds...
That's what with this deep state element, which is leftist, because the whole federal government apparatus in the civil service sector is mostly left-wing, because FDR and Democrats are the ones who set it up. It's their institutions. They created this all these bureaucratic institutions in the federal government. So of course they're going to be filled with leftists. But the people on the right of Trump, though, are trying to basically use his power so that to make an autocracy. So it's almost like the opposite. So instead of like taking away the power, going towards technocracy, they want to move towards autocracy. And Trump, honestly, people need to realize he is overall, in this case, a moderate. He's not further to any side. Remember, he was born in New York. The guy went to one of my Little League games. I grew up in New York City too. He went to one of my Little League games. All right, like he was very involved in the city, in the community, and he always had the same kinds of beliefs about foreign policy and stuff. And he's published on it, and he's been a Democrat for half his life. So when you're from New York, because of our Dutch heritage, right? Not our English heritage, but our Dutch heritage here in New York is our ability to have all these different groups of people different, religions, languages, what have you, cultures, basically living on top of each other, essentially in like New York, and the Dutch basically taught us how to live, how to live amongst that, because and they get it themselves from their commerce, right? Because they know they're so good at commerce, and or for instance, think about New York being bought by the British, right, from New Amsterdam, and they didn't have a major war. The Dutch were like, you know what, we rather figure out like a selling compromise instead. So that's their mindset, and so Trump comes out of that. And so in that state, that Trump is essentially a compromiser. He's a negotiator. I mean, in a funny way, you could think of him almost like a mob boss, where he's basically in the middle of the table, and he brings the guy from one side, and the other side says, okay, what do you want? And then he looks at the other guy and says, what do you want? And it's like, he's trying to find like a middle ground. Like,
he's a broker.
Exactly. And this is a very different way of doing foreign policy that the establishment that created the State Department hates this, right? Because they created foreign policy in a strategy of tension, kind of constant Cold War scenario, where basically you're almost like you're a hair's tip from like shooting at this other country, and so everything is precipitated on that, and there's no trust, there's no communication really. It's all hostile. Whereas Trump wants to have, and look, I don't like these guys either. These are autocracies. They're bad people ultimately, or bad systems. But what Trump wants to do instead, and he did this with North Korea the most, is say, okay, let's try to find a common ground. Maybe like we could trade something, or maybe there's something they want in terms of like industry, whatever. And so try to find that bridge with them and supply that. And then hopefully our soft power will waft over the bridges that we've created and start to influence the people in those countries. And then eventually they'll start calling for, democracy and such, because just like Tocqueville, Alexis de Tocqueville talked about, once people know they can get justice for something, they will not put up with any injustices anymore. Something that they put up with, it could be their whole lives, they put up with something. The minute they realize that it's an injustice and they don't have to put up with this, they start to just not tolerate it anymore, even though they tolerated it before. And so justice in that way is like it's almost like it's like an anti-cancer or something. I don't want to call it a cancer, but it's essentially a growth net in that sense that once you put it in the system, a person sees it, knows it, they want it more. They want it to apply. They don't want to just apply it in one part of life or in sphere. They want to apply it in all parts. So it's justice has this kind of growing aspect, and this might contribute to what Martin Luther King talked about, the moral arc of the universe, because justice has an arc, has a slope to it, and so that growth is unstoppable, and so anyway, so that's how soft power will do. So Trump has a completely different strategy for dealing with these autocracies and what are known as rogue nations. And it doesn't have to do with war. It doesn't have to do with buying more and more arms and escalating rhetoric. He literally wants to negotiate, and so they can't have that because their interest is in creating arms essentially.
Mm-hmm.
All that, and so Trump is a bull in a china shop, because he's going in there and he's
representing the interests of the people, the American proletariat.
Exactly. He's trying.
That was never meant to happen.
No, Hillary was supposed to win.
No, I mean, he wasn't meant to represent the interests of the American proletariat.
Well, yeah, they don't want him to. You see, there's a strain of paternalism in governance, and especially in federal level, where they believe that they can justify, not allowing the people to decide their leaders and whatnot, because essentially they don't, they believe the people don't know their own best interests. So they're like children. If you let a child decide what it wants to eat for dinner, they're going to pick ice cream or whatever. And so it's like, you can't do that. So you have to be paternalistic and control what food your child eats. And so in the same way, they see the population of the human public, the American public, as this kind of like, in this paternalistic way, as children, saying, you guys don't know what's good for you. If you had the reins of power, you would destroy yourselves. So we want to basically guide you for your own sake, for your, for your best interests. Obviously there's a huge problem with that, because, it's never good to, it's never good to have paternalism on that level, because even if it's benevolent in its construction and its intent, eventually the only person that can put up with being a paternal figure over you in that kind of a way is a mother. So most people would not put up with doing that with strangers, let alone, whole populaces. And so eventually, even if it starts with good intentions, that paternalism will then just grow rotten, and people will just say, these stupid idiots, and there'll be a contempt will start to grow, because it's almost like you have to wipe the asses of these folks. And paternalism also will create a dumber populace, right? Because that will encourage, not thinking for yourself and having the government do certain things for you. And so it will just have, you're just going to breed a class of people that have to take care of these other people, and they'll just grow contempt for them. And, lo and behold, at certain points, that may even start to kill them off, because, they're just like animals or something like that. So see, it's dangerous. And that's what you see in the federal government. And that's why they don't want Trump.
You were saying something about city-states, and I hope you'll explain a bit more about the context, because I don't think I got what you were saying about who was promoting city-states, or whatever you were saying earlier.
Yes. So essentially, to make things simple, there are three major enemies of American sovereignty and constitutionalism. They come from the left, the right, and the center, right? So, or the left of center, right? So first, you have what are known as the liberal imperialists. This is a term from Mersheimer, the international studies scholar. He calls them the liberal imperialists, and this is like, almost like the Bill Gateses of the world, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, the UN, in a sense, where basically they want to kind of create some form of global governance and ensure, certain forms of governance across the board, in the name of like, choice or some kind of liberal mindset like that. And so that, obviously they ultimately want like technocracy. They want government that's run by AI, let's say, not has no human input or something. So that's them, right? Then on the other side, you have the newest group, which is the progressive Maoists. They come all the way from the left. And so China, by building its military up in the last decade or so, or 2 decades, it is basically broken off from that first group of liberal imperialists, because the whole point was, we'll let you into the WTO, but you're going to become powerhouse and that, but you're not going to grow a military. But they started growing a military. And so now you have a group of, and this is the smallest group, by the way, out of the three. And these progressive Maoists, as I call them, they are essentially trying to create usurp America's role as the global hegemon. And they want to put China as the global hegemon. And there's a term that I learned a couple of weeks ago called suzerainty, I think.
Suzerainty.
Suzerainty. Yes, and so that's this form of governance that's unique to ancient China or back then.
It means control over your own foreign policy, yes? That's what I think it means.
No, well, the way I understand it is that it's essentially a tributary empire. So you have a hegemon nation, right? And then you have these smaller nations that are not micromanaged by the larger the hegemon, but are basically given tribute, and their actions on the international level are basically controlled by the hegemon. So the way Beijing says describes it now in their book published by Springer International in 2021 called China 2050, which is essentially their blueprint, what they want to see China become, hegemon. They say that they want a system where that China will be at the foot of a chorus. This is a quote. China will be at the foot of a chorus of nations. So China's going to be like in front of a chorus of the nations. And so China basically says that you're going to be in this chorus of nations, that you're a nation. And if you think about that for a second, that means that if you're just one voice, you're going to be drowned out. The chorus is going to be heard, not there. So if you realize that, China's basically creating almost like a whoever yells together the loudest will get my attention, and that's the kind of role they want to play. And obviously that's not a role America plays with our power, but that's what they want to do with their power. And they literally have written it and admitted it. So that's that's the progressive Maoists. Now, finally, coming to the city states and all this stuff, there's the far right, and the far right is coming from the guys that are insidious and worming their way into the Trump campaign. These are the Straussian fascists, and so essentially what they want is a bunch of city states instead of like the federal government and the large level government. They want a bunch of like Singapore, different Singapores everywhere. And they call this dynamic geographies, and the intent there is that essentially you, as a person, will you'll get to pick your own dictator. So, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world. It's like so many problems with that. First, if you grow up in one dictatorship, and that dictatorship isn't popular, it's getting a brain drain, it's hemorrhaging people. You really think that dictator is going to allow the other ones to know? He's going to put a bunch of propaganda, he's going to lie, he's going to, it's ridiculous. But that's what they believe. They say, well, a bunch of dictatorships is great because CEOs are governed by dictatorships, essentially. And therefore, government should be done the same way, even though, corporations are very specialized. And on top of that, they have a board of directors with corporate law on top of that, and so it's not really a dictatorship, and yet people like this are infecting the far right, and the group that you found me in is like that, But I mean, I appreciate the people in that, and I like them. I think it's whenever you're a scholar and you meet other scholars or people that are like that, there's a certain affinity that grows, even though they may disagree with you.
So basically, when you hear white nationalists talk about things like balkanization and peaceful separation, they mean establishing their own ethno-city states. Is that the kind of thing? Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes. And so the way they want to get there now, what their strategy is called accelerationism. And that's all the kind of racial baiting, like putting, stories that cause people to inflame racial tensions. And they believe that if they push that hard enough, accelerated hard enough, that people will eventually call for that kind of ethnic divide and say, okay, you guys over here, and that will facilitate overall the city-state process. So it's a very, very ingenious plan. It's very, like the in the vein of the British Round Table groups that were started by like Stuart Rhodes and stuff like that. Looking these groups looking to align their interests with other groups, try to align everybody's interests so they could get things done. So it's in that same strain, that same spirit. But
I haven't heard of Stuart Rhodes. Who was that?
Yeah, he was, he's British,
You mean Cecil Rhodes?
I'm so sorry. You're right. You're right. I'm so sorry. See, I'm not British. No, you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no problem. Well, at least we know who we're talking about now. Okay.
Yes. But, all those, round table groups he started and stuff, and purposes behind them, it's the same vein. It's in the same spirit of that, same tradition, really.
Yes, divide and rule.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any idea of what went wrong?
With what exactly?
In the sense that in
America.
Yes, what went wrong with America?
So, if you remember, I think America's issue is its self-confidence. So we may ask, what happened to its self-confidence? And what I've found in trying to create a theory of American exceptionalism, which will naturally try to understand its any pervertation, not permutations, but any challenges to it. What I found is that myopia is the cause. And so, to understand that, we just need to know that history has been moving forward, has been being propelled really by what I call amelioration. And I'm sorry. History progresses via the growing fidelity of communication, right? That ever since the death of Christ and the resurrection of Christ on the cross, there's been a growing push that history has been driven by a desire to include, to know better the person you're speaking with. To have communication between people have more fidelity, in that when someone says they feel a certain way, you could feel it more, and in a way their voice is more represented, and that has been growing in history. And it first grew into certain institutions like the church and some others, but and then you had the Reformation where it really started going. But when it came to the founding of America, at that point, that process started to spill over into the public, so that instead of benefiting only certain institutions, it started benefiting the public sphere, and in essence, really creating it as we know it today. And so that process, once the founding begins, I call that amelioration, and that's what we see in the world. First, through the massive immigration patterns of the 19th century, where people hear, "Oh, there's this place called America, and there's all this promise there." And it's so unprecedented that people then just pack everything up and just go there, just by that. But then you had the 20th century where there's even more change, especially after 1945. And so I call that process amelioration. And I borrow the word amelioration from George Washington in his circular letter in 1783, which is the pinnacle of his career there, and the pinnacle of his own exceptionalism. And so what we see then is that the process of myopia comes from, as we start to overcome the tyranny of distance, right? As we start to close, and become more and more close to those things that we're striving towards, we start to drift apart in a bunch of different ways. And so after a while, you have people at the end of the phrase, of all these different phrases, and they start to think to themselves, how does this thing all put together? And they don't have, so they're so close to the thing they've been looking at, like the thing that, whether it be their hobby or it could be the thing they're trying to perfect, or, it could be, let's say, a professional trying to make a better machine, and that's all they think about. And America affords that, and yet people get so myopic, they get so close to that thing that they can't see how all this other stuff around them, this diverse, matrix of America, how that all fits together, and then they sort of question whether it even should. And so myopia, in this sense, is just you're standing so close to that thing and striving towards that you don't see how everything fits together again, and so that gets exploited by certain groups like the Straussian fascists, or by the the liberal imperialists. But because
tunnel vision, is that another way of putting it?
Yes, tunnel vision's one. They're so focused on that. Tunnel vision's good. Because they can't see anything else right now, and they need to take a step back, but they don't know that. They think that's normal. They're so used to it. See, America, everyone before America was most people were striving to live, like their hobby was making sure they didn't die, right? And yet in America, we have literally, like, you could keep the lights on all night long. It's like, oh, Sunday I can't do anything. You keep your lights on, and you could be in this nice little space, and you could literally devote all your time to something. I mean, we see it with, like, on TikTok or videos where people do these elaborate things with, like, dominoes stacks, or like a house of cards that's like 6 stories tall or whatever, right? People have time to do this. There's probably people in other countries that only make $1 a day or something and have to, like, go a mile to get a gallon of water. They probably see that and they're like, what? But that's what America affords. But without proper civics education, which hasn't been going on, the myopia, you're chasing that thing that you're interested or that you're concerned with, and next thing you know, you're so close to it. America's afforded your spirit to be unleashed, so that it wasn't being coerced by prior dynasties of power, or it wasn't like, oh, no, you can't be anything but a potter because your father was a potter, or no, you're from this town. People from that town never do anything else but this or that. Like, no, that unleashing of the spirit, America, the founding unleashed it, and then that spirit has gone so deep into where it wants that it's forgotten its source. It's forgotten where all these other groups come together. And you call it tunnel vision. Tunnel vision is actually pretty good. Myopia. But that's our problem. And that's the source of our lack of confidence. And then you have players like Russia, even though it's very unpopular to talk about Russian propaganda because it's been beaten to death by the left in a very, very irresponsible way by them, that actual Russian propaganda that's surging right now gets ignored, but that Russian propaganda furthers the divisions, right? And furthers these talking points about, like, for instance, the talking points about American divorce, a national divorce, which is ridiculous. But, people literally are talking about it on big level, like whether there should be a national divorce, or whether Texit should happen, the Brexit, the Texas version of Brexit, I mean, these are all talking points that are facilitating the dissolving of America, and so for the people that think you don't need the federal government is important because it's there not to fill in the potholes in the street. It's there to ensure that your rights are being respected, they're being observed, and that's what Madison, James Madison, intended them to be. He was actually very appalled at how many of the local state legislators would be very basically prejudiced, to say the least, prejudiced or discriminatory, and that really shocked him. So he basically, in designing the federal government, he basically had it so that the federal government was there solely to protect that. It's not there to, like, run ordinary life. Are you familiar with Hegel at all?
Yes, thesis, antithesis, synthesis? That guy?
Yes, but do you know his political typology about basically his theory of right?
Vaguely, but please.
The only reason why I bring it up, not because I want to show how I know obscure things, but it's because he has a typology of what it means to do right action, and basically the way he has it, two of them belong to the federal government, and only one of them belongs to the state government. And so the one that belongs to state government, he calls it Civility, and that's basically like what he called like ethical life, like civic, like basically like the norms of life, like what's acceptable around the people, in your town and your family and all that.
Oh, social norms.
Exactly. So for instance, in New Orleans, it's okay to like walk around with like an open shirt and a can of beer, and but if you did that in like I don't know, like a Massachusetts, some town, it wouldn't be a good thing. But now where does the federal government come in? That comes in with the two other points that Hegel said. So he says, okay, you have Civility, but then you have moralitat and what he calls abstract right. And so the way we could think of these two is, you ever heard of positive and negative liberty?
Positive liberty is the right to do something, and negative liberty is the right not to do something.
No. So you had almost it from the first half. So positive liberty is the right to something. So for instance, you have the right to an education, right? That's a positive liberty, right? A negative liberty is you have the right to be free from something. So, for instance, a negative liberty would be you have the right to be free from persecution, to be free from coercion, to be free from marauding gangs of mafiosos that are trying to extort you and your business, right? You have the right to be free from those things. So in this sense, essentially, we could think of that as these two groups where moralitat is essentially what he calls like basically the stuff you don't want to happen to you. So this would include like someone harassing you or someone trying to block your path or cut your car's brakes or something like that. Like someone was like posing that threat to you in that on multiple levels, like. And then positive right, or I'm sorry, abstract right instead has to do with the potentiality of things. So it's like abstract right would be like the potential for you to drive a car, the potential for you to go across state lines, what have you, right? So it's like
like the theoretical right to marry.
Yeah. So the reason why he calls it abstract is because you could think of different things to do. Whereas with the moralitat, it's focused on the body. It's focused on like what, the things you don't want to happen to it, which in that sense are a little, I guess for him, a little less abstract, but I mean, you could see why, because it's more, stuff like falling down is not the same as like, hopes and dreams of fulfilling, but, so both moralitat and the positive right, positive negative liberty are the responsibility of the federal government. And so the federal government is there solely to ensure that those things are respected. They don't care about potholes. People say, oh, you send money to Ukraine. What about the potholes? The potholes aren't paid by that, albeit you could have a state that says, listen, we're in dire straits. Could we get a federal, a grant or a loan so we could pay for our potholes or to fix them? Then that could happen, but it'll have to still be through the state government through requests. So it's not the responsibility or the duty of the federal government to do those things. So given that's the case, the federal government, for instance, would be concerned with whether people are getting an education, whether people are children because I don't know if you know this, but in America, it's illegal to deny education. If you want to homeschool, you could homeschool, but you have to homeschool. If you're found that you're not homeschooling, then as a parent, you could lose complete custody and you could go to jail. And so, in that sense, Americans have to learn how to read and write, and they have to learn the history of America, and that is so important. Those kinds of civics are so important. If you don't do that, then there's no cohesiveness to the country, and people are just going to, and that's what's been happening for the last several decades in schools, like the one I went to, public schools, where they teach you more about respecting authority and, like showing up on time and shutting up, when people are speaking, all that stuff, as opposed to teaching about citizenship. And so you have a whole generation or so of people grown in America who basically know nothing about their citizenship and their civics, and instead have been trained to basically to defer to whatever authority is present, and to be able to identify authority. And that's it. And so, it's a shame. It's an absolute shame. Like, again, in my case, all the civics I know, I learned after the age of 30. That's amazing, but that's the case. I never had a civics class,
What did you learn after you were 30 about your country?
Oh, so much. One of the things
that you should have been taught at school.
Oh my God. I'll tell you one thing. Learning U.S. history, especially. I gotta because I've been reading the Oxford University Press history, the multi-volume series they have on American history. I've been reading through that, and some of the best. Some of the books that are really, really good. They're all good though. They're all great. And they reading through that, especially the first like 3 or 4, like Empire of Liberty and What God Had Wrought, especially those two, which cover basically the years 1787 to about the beginning of the Mexican-American War. So, maybe something like around 1838 or something like that. That made me actually less conservative, so that I was getting a lot of right-wing media, and after reading all that and learning about like the stuff that we went through, and how a lot of it is like a repeat, and then the hysteria that is whipped up about things that we conquered, that we went over, that we survived in the past, that we could survive again. And so it started to make me less right wing, or at least less into right wing media. But I mean, look, like one of the things that shocked me, and I have the quotes, so I'll show it. One thing that shocked me is when they said that in the 1820s there was not only a porous border where you had a bunch of illegal immigrants coming in constantly, but also you had certain localities allowing these illegals to vote, not in federal elections though, but in state and county and local elections.
Shocking.
1820.
But then, okay.
Yeah. So this is some of the examples of the things I've learned through my history research that have just like really clarified my view on things in a way that it's just it's a blessing. But that has really also isolated me in the political sphere, because you realize how a lot of this stuff is hysteria. Like there's no reason to be hysterical about it,
because it's all happened before. I don't know if you're familiar with the case of the Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States government.
Oh, which that's obviously a Supreme Court case, but which?
It was basically
Holy Trinity Church. What?
Yes, let me give you the link, because I might not be able to. Yeah, so I found it, and it's on Wikipedia.
Oh, 1892. Oh, wait.
Yes,
I think I've read.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is this the is this, wait, look, without even looking, this is the court where one of the justices said that America is a Christian country. Is that right?
That's right, Justice Brewer.
There we go.
But I thought it was funny that it was actually about the alien contract labor law, and it was basically people then complaining about immigrant labor, and in this case it was a vicar from England, and they were saying he was a foreigner and he shouldn't have come.
Oh. Yeah, exactly. Wow. You know, I was looking this up like a couple of months ago. And so it's just, you know, a book was the justice that said this wrote a book.
Yeah, he had to write a book, and it was like
a couple of years later.
Weird. Yes, because obviously America isn't. Well, it doesn't have an official religion, so it can't be said to be a Christian nation, you know, in that sense of the word. And so he had to write a book saying yes and no, it is and it isn't.
See, I've formulated a way to kind of merge it, right? So, and again, I've written on this. Okay, so there's this. If you look at the history of tolerance, if you go to the Encyclopedia of Philosophy of Stanford University, if you go to their entry on tolerance, you'll see that the history of tolerance essentially started with Christianity. The closest thing you have to tolerance before Christianity is something like the Stoic idea of like putting up with pain or stuff you don't like, but it's not for the sake of the thing that you're putting up. It's for your own sake, to make you better. But the tolerance for the other, tolerating to benefit the other person, only started after the gospel was being spread. And so there's a Latin phrase, you know, like non vili von posse or whatever. I have it written down there, that it basically says God only desires inner conviction that is willfully given. So essentially, God wants, when we say God wants your heart, he wants you willfully to go towards him. Now, because that's the case, human beings are cut off from that ability to look at someone and know if they really believe that or whether they're just saying it. And so because of that, there's a growth, a gulf, of tolerance that you have to tolerate, because essentially you don't know whether this person is really, and then on top of that, you don't know if whether you're right or wrong about something, and because it's your conviction that matters instead. And so there becomes this space that is created where, okay, you got to let the person go their own way, because ultimately God doesn't want me to force him to do something. God wants him to follow him voluntarily, and that means we have to allow him to stay doing things voluntarily, because we can't force him to voluntarily love God. So we just basically, all we could do is allow him to remain his voluntary self. And so that what happens in America is, so God wants everyone to voluntarily follow him. Now, what America does that's special is that it creates a space where people can follow their conscience peaceably without the threat of some extortion mafia or some heroding band.
You're being burnt at the stake for blasphemy.
Or that, yeah, exactly. Like you could follow your conscience. What?
Burning heretics at the stake was a Christian practice.
It was a church practice. It's not the gospel. This is. Look, there's a big reason, and look, we'll say you're more Atlantic than continental, but the reason why the Reformation took so long, is that at the same time Christianity is coming to the fray, you have all these landowners that are claiming to be, later on, especially with Christianity, that they rule the land, that they have divine right. And so for some strange reason, which I believe is God's providence, North America was completely free from dynasties. If you go further south,
because you're a republic.
No, I'm talking about before colonization. I'm talking about the way that the natives were there. The North American natives never had any kind of permanent social structures, permanent social hierarchy. Sorry, they never they were basically very tribalish and very they followed the elders, but there was no like despots. There were no tyrannical figures. There were no kings. You had that further south in Mexico and Central America, with the Incas and the Aztecs, but in North America that wasn't the case, and so there's a big question, and Alexis de Tocqueville actually brought this up in his book. He said, it has to be the hand of God that to keep this area kind of pristine from those social structures, so that when the America was seated, there was no dynasties of power, of generational power to battle against or to compromise with. To say, okay, we're going to do this. It was all for the clear, essentially, and that and other reasons too. But that was a big thing there, especially for instance, if you go to Mexico, there's still a lot of native influence and control in all regions, because they didn't have that same they were still there. Those social structures were still.
So what I think what you seem to be saying is that in Central America there were empires such as the Aztec and Inca empires, but in North America there were just nomadic Indians. Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily nomadic, but they were basically there were no permanent social hierarchies. So nearly all the social hierarchies were essentially relegated to elders or maybe just like older males. But there was no patrimonialism.
Right. Yes. Because Native Americans were mainly matrilineal, which means, doesn't it mean that they didn't take marriage very seriously?
No, not at all. They did take marriage seriously. What they had that we would consider remember, I'm speaking only for the Indian tribe that I know, the Lenape, which is the ones that they encountered the Dutch.
Could you spell it? Could you spell the name of this tribe?
Hold on. So it's a large tribe, actually. Hold on. The word Lenape actually means original people. That's all it really means. The Lenape, called the Lenape. So LENAPE.
Okay, thank you.
And these guys basically inhabited everything from the Hudson Valley all the way down to Cape May. So essentially, like several miles north of New York City, down to basically where New Jersey meets Delaware. And so marriage for them was what was lax for them, but that we would consider lax, is that their divorce was very simple. It was essentially if the two just decided that, hey, we're just not feeling each other anymore. There's amicable. You just spread your own ways, part your own ways, and so there's that. But they did have marriage, and they have monogamy and all that stuff. At least serial monogamy, but they had a lot of similarities, but at the same time, for some strange reason, their people never felt the need to create these kind of permanent social classes and social structures, and and thrones and seats and things like that.
But perhaps you need a city-state before you get it together to do these things.
Well, they had their sub-tribes, or their basically the tribes that comprised them were essentially relegated by like beaver. Oh, here they are. Yeah, wolf, turtle, and turkey, and then within each one, there's like about a dozen, sub tribes. Like Big Feet is a sub tribe of wolf, or green leaves is a sub tribe some tribe of Peridot. And so in that way, each one is, I mean, you can't call it a city, but it's essentially, an autonomous, semi-autonomous community within a large whole. So they didn't have like really large cities, but they had, these tribes, and they knew of each other and they connected with one another. And in the greater Northeast area, you had a group of languages called Algonquin, and there was a lot of trading going on, and even a confederacy called the Iroquois Confederacy, existing in basically where Michigan is now, and they basically, there were no big cities, but there were large trade networks. So there was a certain sophistication to a lot of their practices. That would put them more advanced than some kind of hunter-gatherer tribe. But they just never felt the need to create what in Europe was like, basically all these dynasties, all these royal families and claims to land, and not just a claim to a land to, this is the land where I fish and I hunt and all that. No, but a more material claim to it, a more, related to a right, essentially. And so that's, that's the question mark there. But I think, like I said, it's all providence ultimately. But,
yes, I think it's only when you found a city state that you suddenly start taking seriously, who holds power and how he is to be chosen. Maybe.
Wait. You said if whether I wait. Say that again. I'm sorry.
I'm saying that it is only when you have founded a city state do you take more seriously who is to be your leader and how he is to be chosen, such as whether you're going to be a monarchy or a republic.
Okay, so interestingly enough, let's take Singapore as an example. Their I don't want to say their motto, but essentially the understanding there is, if you're outside of politics, like if you're not part of the your Congress or whatever, keep your head down and mind your own business. And
yes,
so
I'm glad you mentioned Singapore, because I think there are lots of republics that are, in fact, monarchies in disguise.
Yes. So Singapore, for instance, since the British, as you know, left there, they've had, since their claim to independence, they've had the same. I don't know if it's the same person, but the same party. It might be the same person, because I think this goes back to the 50s, right?
Yeah, it's Lee Kuan Yew, and then followed by his son Lee Hsien Loong. Right,
and so I think that's obvious that it's a veiled autocrat. I mean, same thing with like
North Korea
or El Salvador now, the budding dictator, Bukele, and so it's just. Yeah, these are like veiled things, but this is part of the loss of confidence that I'm talking about. Because you see, it's not just that the America suffers when we lose confidence. The world then suffers, because then the strong man, the autocratic dictator wannabes, see that as an opportunity for them to say, yeah, that democracy system doesn't work. Strong man here. We're gonna do it the way old fashioned, the way that it works, and that opens the door for that. And so it's not just for our sake that we have to remain a shining beacon. It's for everyone else too, because the fact that America is there to benefit the public. That's what it's about. It's benefiting not a certain family or certain group or certain class, but to benefit the public. And what is the public? Who is the public? Everybody, us, all of us. The public is us, Publius, right? The public, that's what we are. And so America is there to thwart that. And yet you have these dynasties of control for millennia that now realize that, they say, okay, I've been doing this for millennia, and now out of nowhere, the people that I'm ruling are talking about rights and democracy, and they want to rule. It's like, what the hell is this, right? And so it's like you want to push back against that, and especially at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which also America precipitated, at least in part, and it was, you had all this new money, this nouveau riche come into play, and these the ancient regime, let's say, basically saw this, and they said, no, we can't just have all this new influx here. We have to nip this in the bud and control all these folks. And so all these social arbiters appeared by the 1880s and 90s to make sure that all the nouveau riche were conditioned, were trained, so to speak, to do the right thing, to think the right way, to dress the right way, all that stuff. And so that level of control is part of that anxiety they have. And so America just flares them up, and Trump does it even further because, they for the most part, they found a way to placate this country from within, to basically get their way. And Trump is a big stumbling block to that, huge stumbling block. And he's there thwarting that. And I don't believe he knew that. I believe he started doing the political thing because he thought that Washington, D.C. was too self-centered to negotiate or something like that, or too incompetent.
Well, he just probably just couldn't stand it anymore. I mean, there's no reason why a man with his wealth would want to put himself through this. I guess it's because he just couldn't stand and do nothing.
You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. He feels a debt to the nation. And so a lot of people don't talk about this, but Trump wasn't in the military, so to speak, but he might as well have been in the military because he went to military school from about 13 to 18. And so he basically, if military school is, it's like boarding school. Essentially, you live there, and it's basically like boot camp. I mean, so in a very clear sense, Trump may have not been recruited as an adult to the army or the military, but he might as well have been gone through those boot camp regimes or those basic training, because he went to military school for like 6 years. So I think that also gained in him a certain discipline and a certain appreciation for America. And so, and then he also, how much money he made. He wasn't born a billionaire, right? I mean, his dad was rich, but he became 100, 500 times richer than his father, and he changed the way real estate was done in New York City. So he has a lot of ego in that level where he believes he could get stuff done. He has ideas. He has this feeling of a debt to the nation. And then the third thing is he has money. So you put these things together, and he's basically a very unique person in a very strategic position that almost no one else could occupy as of now. And that's why he's so important. That's why he's so crucial, because without him, we would have had the first dynasties of America, like the dynasties of Bush, and then the dynasties of Clinton, and then later the dynasties of Obama, and and basically are you familiar with something called new public governance?
No.
Or new public management?
No, this is the first I've heard of it. Do tell. So
it's out of the academic, it's out of the academy. And it's only about 5 or 10 years old. So new public management is the belief that certain public management roles that are now occupied by, or have been traditionally occupied by the state or done by the state, could be done by private enterprise instead. So it's kind of like a form of privatization act, but it's not. But it's more specific. And essentially, so for instance, whether it be keeping records or supplying water or something, they think that it's better to give it to these private groups and have them basically manage what used to be managed by the government. And that kind of just sounds like austerity and all that stuff. But new public governance is where it gets very unsettling. And so new public governance says that the only role of government is to make itself appear legitimate to the people. And so and it's like that's exactly what it is. And so essentially they say that the government's role is kind of like a PR role to make the public believe that not only
the government is doing its job.
Yes, but not in this kind of like, oh, you have to love the government. No, legitimacy is not the same as approval. Approval is like, oh yeah, my government is great, that's awesome. So no, legitimacy, you could have someone who hates their government, but they feel like, well, but that's their legitimate place. That's that they belong there, and that's the role of government, is to inculcate in the public the feeling that this government entity, that's their true place in life. That's where they belong, and so if things may be unfair, it's like tough luck, because ultimately that's their place, and the things they do, they have to do them. And so when I read that, I couldn't believe it. I was like, are you kidding me? That essentially that's the only role of government is to create a sense of legitimacy. I mean, that's, wow, right? It's amazing.
Well, or to give an appearance of doing its job so people don't, overthrow it.
Essentially, exactly.
I mean, it's almost nobody says, who made you the boss?
But they're going to say no human is the boss. Just the AI is the boss. So it's not human. So it can't be judgmental in that same way as a human. So it's almost like abstract. It's or objective. Sorry, the AI is going to make those decisions. The AI is going to make those kinds of governance decisions and such, or at least allegedly. But you see that's those liberal imperialists basically want to, in a way, remove personality out of government. That's why they hate Trump so much, because Trump is literally full on personality, and they don't like that. They want to get rid of. It's not just they want everyone to be the same or look the same or be the same. They think the personality is evil. People are biased. People are dirty. People make this, horrible choices. They hurt people, whatever. So if government is that thing we all have in common, let's make sure we get rid of personality, ego out of government. But obviously there's self-contradictory elements there. But essentially that's what drives them against him. And then on the right, with these Straussian fascists, they see Trump as a wedge. They see him as an opportunity to get into the levers of power, and do so with a big populist wave. By the way, I want to be clear: I'm not a populist. I'm a Trumpster, but I'm not a populist. I think populism is actually a negative thing. It's too extreme. I believe there should be elites of meritocracy, and there's always going to be elites of different things. It's just you want to make sure.
I take the same position.
What was that?
I take the same position. I'm not a Democrat either, because people just misuse or abuse their power. And as regards democracy, if I say that George Washington advise against political parties. Would you be familiar with the idea?
Yeah, yes. And like I said, I read that Oxford history, so I got to see how political parties emerged. And absolutely, Washington really didn't want to run. He did so because so many people asked him to. And he was really, the personality of the country at the beginning there. He's what everyone was all bickering with one another. The only people that everyone liked was Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big reason for that, for some reason, is he was like 6'4" or 6'3". So, at a time when your average height was, much smaller than people now, this guy was towering above people. So that's a big deal. And he also, he wasn't, from what I read, that when he started his career, he wasn't like this kind of pious person. He was actually kind of looking for fame and recognition and stuff. But yet the war tempered him in a way that kind of made him more selfless. Mm-hmm. And because again, remember, Washington, it wasn't Washington's idea for revolution. His state came to him after the state and the people in there decided they were going to do the revolution, and then they came to Washington and they asked him, "Can you lead us?" It's really very it mirrors what's his name, Lee, General Lee from the Civil War. Mm-hmm. I can't remember his first name right now, but general, the general of the Confederacy.
Yes, I'm a bit vague about him.
Yeah, no, his name is Lee, but I can't remember his first name right now.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see.
I mean, I have heard of him.
Robert E. Lee. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in a way, Washington kind of resembles Robert E. Lee in that kind of that he wasn't looking to fight in the Civil War. They came to him, being that he was respected and all that. Said, can you help us out? And so Washington really didn't want to be president, and he wasn't that great of a president. He
was just a successful military leader.
Nope, because that wouldn't make him exceptional. Because Napoleon was a much more, much better leader. And because again, remember, you could argue that the British were spread thin, or or they were had other engagements, but no, what made him exceptional was in that circular letter in 1783, where essentially he just defeated the most powerful army on earth at that point in history, and mm-hmm. he gave up all his power. He didn't use it to then go on a campaign. He didn't use it to then put himself in a certain position of power, like as a king. Or he could have become king. He could have easily, if he wanted to, he probably would have become king, because that's how much people liked him. And mm-hmm. He did, which I think only one person in history has done. This Roman farmer, who he became a general, and then after conquering all this stuff, instead of like going on to rule, he gives up his power and then goes back to farming. So I can't remember the guy's name. It starts with a C, I think, like Cerebus, mm-hmm. Something like that. But that's what made Washington so exceptional and unique, was him giving up that power, him having basically at the foot of you could be this, you could be a king, you could be a ruler, and he just gave all that up to go back to the little quiet life he had before, even though he could have had so much. And that's the character of the revolution that was so important, that all these guys that were involved had a lot more to lose than to gain. A lot of, like, for instance, the French Revolution, it was the opposite. You had people that were starving and on the doorstep of death, right? So they had a lot more to lose than to gain. They're already half dead. But the American colonialists in their revolution were not in the same position. And so they were, in a sense, taking a luxury to do so. And so and they were not doing so for material gain. They're basically they had a lot more to lose than to gain, and that's what a lot of the founders happened. A lot of the founders lost everything. I mean, even some of our favorites like Madison or Jefferson, they died with pennies. You know, they died having to sell off parts of their stuff. You know, I mean, sad. That's pathetic. You know, and yet that the exceptional aspects that they were not motivated by greed. All these other revolutions throughout history were all motivated because the people wanted to gain something and wanted to get more of something. This was all about the ideal of self-governance and citizenship and rule of law and all that, and being accountable, you know, to the state legislator. You know, that's what it was about. And so Washington embody that spirit by giving up power and go back to farm life.
Yes.
So,
which demonstrated his selflessness and sincerity and honor.
Or really, it embodied all those things of the revolution. The revolution, selfless, and on all the terms you just used. Because remember, all those people in the U.S. Revolution had a lot more to lose than to gain. They had a hell of a lot more to lose.
By defying the British.
What? Against the British?
By defying the British.
Exactly, yeah. Again, they were not fighting for riches or anything. It was the ideal that they should be treated like fellow British subjects. And they weren't being treated that way. They were treated lesser than British subjects. And they don't want to be lesser than British subjects. So they felt that, no, we're going to be, we're all the subjects of the king. We deserve certain rights. And it wasn't about taxes. I hate that the way they make it seem so petty. Like they didn't want to pay an extra few pennies on some tea. Like that's not what it was at all. It was about the right to govern yourself. See, up to that point, I mean, you probably know this already. You know that the British never taxed the colonists directly. They always went to like the colonial leaders and said, we need this much money, and then the colonies will figured out how they would collect the money, and they would come up with on their own the way they would collect the money and then send it to Britain. Instead, this time they had the Stamp Act that basically said, no, we're going to direct you we're going to get in your affairs. We're not going to allow you to just figure out how to come up with your money. No, we're going to go right in your affairs and take the money out directly. And that was just had nothing to do with the cost of tea. That had to do all with the way people should be treated, the way the fundamental relationship between people, a public, and their government, how that should be related. And
you have a question in the chat about somebody.
Where's the chat?
If you look at the screen, it's a question by Oswald Spengler, and he asks what you think about the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, under Trump.
Good question. So I just got a book called The Shadow State, which is written by this New York Times journalist that looks at this kind of like shadowy right-wing cabal that I was referring to earlier. And while Trump is not a major player in it, like I say, he's being hijacked. People like Mike Pence and I believe the Voss are, from what I saw, that I haven't done my homework on her. I like school choice, so that's always a good thing. But there's a guy Dumbledore who's written about a lot of, he's a sociologist. He's written a lot about like oligarchies and things like that, and shadowy groups in America, and he points to how Trump put all these billionaires in place, but I think just because you're a billionaire doesn't make you a bad person. So I don't want to just assume that just because she's a billionaire, she's a bad person. But I really haven't done my homework on her. If I had to go with like, real quick, are you a truster or no? Like, yes or no, real quick, like just on your gut, I would go no. and you got to cut Trump a break with that. You know, he is. He wasn't an insider in Washington anyway. He's a different kind of insider, but and so he's not going to know who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, and that's one of the strengths actually, that it shows that he doesn't hire cronies. You know, how many people did Biden fire? Right, nobody, because they all hired just their cronies. Whereas Trump is, oh no, you're not doing the job I thought you'd be doing. Get out, right? So he's like actually holding them accountable. And, you know, he's going to make mistakes and stuff because he got all these, you know, people. And then, you know, it's the ego that these insidious enemies play to, but he knows all this, though, ultimately. And you got to cut him some slack. And here's the good thing. You want to know the real deal here? The real thing that the icing on the cake, the silver lining, right?
Go on.
Is that these 4 years that he was out of office may have been much better for policy and for his governance style than if he would have stayed in. Because these 4 years, not only can he do a purge and see who's real, who's not real, and all that stuff, and get a profile of the enemy, but he could also then have all this more or less quiet time, downtime, to come up with the policy structure, to come up and make one in a way that he would have not been able to do if he stayed in office. You know, he would have been more shooting from the hip. Now he has a Agenda 47, so he literally has a blueprint that we could then implement on his way back in, and a way for the public to hold him accountable, to say, hey, here's the things you wrote, you said you were going to do in detail. Why aren't you doing them? You know. So, you know, it's in a way, it's good that he had this 4-year hiatus. You know, it's a good thing ultimately, you know, for the quality of his governance-ship. So I predict that if he's in, those 4 years are going to be very dense. There are going to be lots of stuff are going to go on, because he's going to hit the ground running. He's going to ready to have the whole thing mapped out. And yeah, you know, and it's going to be one, you know. I mean, I wouldn't hate him getting a second one, you know, because he was cheated out of it. But you know, nah, I think you might, you know, just do the 2, and that's it. Just lead the example, and you know, and we'll hopefully put in Ben Carson as the next president. You know,
Ben Carson,
yes,
the black doctor.
That's my pick for VP. That's who I want to be VP.
What about Tucker Carlson? I think that would be a winning combination.
Not at all.
Really? Why not?
So 2 levels. One is I don't like the guy. I used to like him, really, but I don't like him. So politics wise, it's wrong. But
what has Tucker done to annoy you?
But also, you know, there's the 40 laws of power or whatever it is. And that first law of power says you cannot outshine the master. And so there's a reason why Trump picked Pence, or someone that was like quiet. When you have a big personality like Trump, the sidekick has to be someone that's more meek, more mild mannered. You can't have someone that's also bombastic and high personality, because what you're going to have is 2 people shouting over each other, 2 people competing, trying to, you know, stand in front of the other over and over again. You know? That's not what you want, you know. So Ben Carson, on the other hand, is mild mannered, but he's also a genius. You know, I mean, the guy was the head of his department at 30 years old. Most people are finishing their PhD at 30. Most people are still in residency at 30, and yet, you know, or a lot of people, and yet he is not just in the department, not just a full professorship, he is the freaking department chair. So, I mean, that's at 30. I mean, that's amazing. That's an American success story and all that stuff. You know, it's beautiful. And he's an actual black person. If he becomes president, he will become the first black president. This other guy is not black, Obama.
He's only half black.
He grew up, he didn't grow up around black people, number one. Number 2, his mom wasn't black; she was white. So he had no one around him that was black. Because there's a large part of being black is a cultural thing. as growing up, not just with the slang or with the community, but also with the trauma, and that's because of the left being so irate with racism and exaggerating it all stuff. There's a plight that gets overlooked, and there's a real trauma for people that are Black that are born in America, because your history is tied to this slavery nonsense. And there's a sense where everyone has a family that loves them and go down to the generations and all this stuff. And with Blacks, instead of especially if it's in the modern day, without knowing their fathers and stuff and all that, you don't feel like family. You don't feel like you feel like you're more of an out product of the world rather than something the world wanted or something like that. And so it's very traumatizing. And then so that's something that he doesn't share. Obama, he doesn't know anything about that. He might know about that intellectually, but he doesn't know about that, what that feels like to be like a little kid and see a white kid and then ask why is there this difference there, why is their neighborhood look so much better, or and why whatever, it's a lot of stuff, and it's sad. And I grew up with Black kids and stuff, and some of the poorest ones, those were, my first friend was named Ashaka. There's a lot of trauma there. And so Ben Carson would be the first actual Black president because he shares that trauma. And look what he did with that trauma. See, that's one of the greatest things about the Black community is that they took that trauma but also took the freedom that America afforded them. If even if that was a cold freedom, right? Like a leave you away, leave you to die by yourself freedom, right? Even if it was that, they took that freedom and that pain and they made almost all the culture, or a good deal of it, that white folks and everybody really, especially around the world, more and more enjoy. That whether it be the music they dance to, or the art, or feats of dancing and singing and all that stuff, or creating certain genres of music. I mean, all that stuff came out of that pain. I mean, think about the blues. The blues, it's like wailing. That leads to all the stuff, and then jazz, same thing. Trying to get out of trying to do more than just what was around. Trying to do something different, right? Because the white man rejects you, so you're going to reject their musical scale, and then you got jazz, right? And so it's that's one of the most beautiful things, and this is exemplified in soul, not just soul music, but soul food, where you basically had a group that only had the entrails, like the parts of the the pig or the cow that no one wanted, and they were only given that. And yet, using that, they created a cuisine called soul food and made it taste so good, even though it's like the stuff that was rejected. And so that's what I'm talking about. It's like that's something so special about that community. They could do that. Now, there's a lot of pain, a lot of trauma now, but it's made to be a lot worse. Like your average Black person is not in jail or has nothing to do with jail. It's actually kind of sad how what the left has done and then what the right is now doing to just ruin race relations. And my solution is to mix race, not culture. The more misogyny there is, the better it is for everybody in the long run. That's the only way to really, because then you mix everything up. It's going to get real difficult to separate people more and more, when you got all these.
Yes, and talking about race, I have a question about your race. Would you like to?
Yes.
Tell us?
Yeah. So I guess technically, I consider myself to be a mutt, but my ethnic background obviously is Hispanic. In terms of race, well, my mother immigrated to the U.S. from Argentina. She grew up there and was born there, but she grew up there. She grew up within an enclave. and an ethnic enclave of Syrians. And so her grandparents moved in I think in the middle of the 1800s, moved from Syria to Argentina during this the Lebanese Civil War, the Syrian Civil War, the Damascus Civil War, whatever. So to flee that civil, they're basically refugees, and they settled in Argentina, and so her genes all go back to that Levant, basically a mixture of Lebanese and Syrian, right? Like essentially that area. So that's straightforward for the most part. That's where I get my light skin color. It's from her. My father, on the other hand, who's actually brown, actually, he is he's Puerto Rican, right? And my great grandfather was a slave owner who impregnated illegitimately his servant girl that was this black woman that was my great grandmother. And actually my grandfather actually had to go to court to get the name, my last name, because he wasn't born with that. It wasn't given to him. It was illegitimate. And he felt it would be better for him to have the last name. So so that lineage, I know the name Calderon is Sephardic Jew. So it's a great chance that there's some Sephardic Jew in me. I know that there's some either Irish or French. I got red hairs, so there's some Irish. Supposedly there's French, but that might be more vanity than truth. So in that case, it's a smorgasbord. Like I said, you got black there, you got probably different parts of Europe. If we zoom out or make the focus blurry, we could say that essentially most of my genes come from somewhere around the Mediterranean, whether it be by Syria and Damascus or the Iberian coast, right? It's just you're going to have Mediterranean is going to connect all those, with the exception of like the eighth of me that's black, right, which would be West African. So I'm a mutt overall, but for purposes of government classification, I'm a Hispanic white.
Okay. Well, thank you for
White.
Yes, I've seen your profile pic. Right.
Yeah. A lot of the right wing people think I'm brown or not white enough. While the black Twitter thinks I'm white. And essentially it's just both groups just rejecting me. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's both groups saying you're not one of us, and so that's why race is such a subjective thing.
Yes, and you are an independent scholar.
Yes.
Well, I hope we can talk some more about America as the year progresses with the election.
Oh yes, I'm sorry to doubt your sincerity when we first got on, thinking that your accent wasn't a real one. It's the real McCoy. That's for sure. But yeah, sorry about that. I just I'm on high alert, right? Because I get a lot of trolls and things, and
oh, do you? Okay, because the people who dislike your views.
I really spoke a lot with people from the UK, at least not through voice. So there's also that, right? Like I have very little. Actually, you want to know a little funny thing? When I used to do Uber, and so I was picking up a party of people that were from the UK because they had the accent, and they were coming in the car, and comes in and goes hello, and I'm like hello, and next one goes in hello, and I'm like hello, and then by like the third or fourth one I started going hello, and then so the fifth person comes in and they're like hello, and I'm like hello, and they look at me, what? They thought I was like trying to make fun of them. And it's like, oh no, I just got into the way of saying it. Just like what happened to Madonna when she lived in like London for a few months or something. She was able to like catch an accent, you know. So
Yes.
something like that, you know.
Oh,
But sorry about that. Yeah.
oh, no problem. Oh, and well, I suppose you get trolled because your views are not not racist enough.
So God has given me the power to destroy divine strongholds in the minds of people that, so a stronghold essentially is that citadel that people have that enclose their beliefs and their values. And so when you do that usually by uprooting their assumptions, they get very upset because it's almost like pulling the chair out from under them. I mean, you just messed up what they consider to be a stable, even though it's ideological, it still brings them stability, it colors everything that is. And here I am challenging it. But that's what I'm here to do, because.
So with your space at with Alexander Selkirk, people basically didn't like what you were saying because you were.
When you say Alexander, you're talking about the guy with the profile Ask?
Yes, yesterday on
Twitter. How do you know his name?
Because I've been on his spaces before. But anyway, I heard you in the early hours of the morning, and I thought you were being interesting, and I had the impression that the others didn't like what you were saying, but it sounded quite reasonable to me. I think you were talking about.
I think one of the people that was following me dropped me, but for the most part, other people started following me. So I lost one follower, but I gained like 3 more or something. So I mean, there's when Christ said turn the other cheek, that's basically what I practice and stuff. I try to do my best, and I don't want to get I try not to get into name calling and even though people call me names and all that stuff. I try to be cute about things. I try to be self-deprecating, but it's a challenge because sometimes you see something really disgusting like blatant racism, like people who think that just because I don't know you're from Puerto Rico that now you don't have the same rights or entitled to the same kinds of civic privileges or what have you. It's a little pretty unnerving, but it's a test. It's a challenge that I'm happy to have the burden of right now because I'm learning a lot.
And what are your? I mean, do you have any particular ambition? I mean, do you have an agenda, objective?
Yeah. So if you look at my Substack, I've written basically out what my whole deal is and what I'm about. My most recent articles, Where I'm From, is called Where I'm From and Where I'm Going, and it's pretty self-explanatory. But for the most part, my whole goal, as it says in the bio there on Twitter, is to create a interdisciplinary theory of American exceptionalism so that Americans can identify it and grow their confidence in it and deal with the doubts that come along about it, and that to have that steadfast resolution to be able to bear any doubt about this country. And because with our military being so powerful, it's very unlikely we're ever going to be invaded by another country or something, but it's much more likely that the people in this country drop the ball and really allow the sovereignty to be lost and all that stuff. So it's I'm trying to create that theory to do that. And this is, by the way, this is no different than what intelligence agencies do when they try to fortify their agents. If they want to fortify their agents against, let's say, to be resilient against propaganda or other tricks, information tricks, they'll basically make them well versed in a theory of whatever they believe in, and have it in a geometrical representation, like through space, so they could basically see it as like a coherent structure, and then know that, because if you know the truth about something, you could spot any lie about it. You don't have to spend your time learning what the lies are. Just because you know what the truth is about it, you could, if a lie comes, you could see it. And that's what the intelligence agencies have been doing for decades. And I'm essentially, in a nutshell, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to inculcate Americans from those kinds of doubts and falsehoods about America, and America being bad, or America being unworthy or not exceptional. Or the one I hate the most is when people say every country thinks it's exceptional. I mean, that's just, it's so dismissive, and at the same time, it's airheaded. Yeah, of course, everyone thinks they're special, but exceptional is objective in the sense that it stands out in a certain context. And our founding is unlike any other. Let alone the fact that every constitution on earth was basically inspired by the American one, even if not in structure, it still was. They wouldn't be doing a constitution if it wasn't for our country, America. So it's and you Brits, you guys have. I think it's really cute that the British say they have an uncodified constitution. I really think that's cute.
It means they don't have one. They don't have one.
No, they don't. But they call uncodified constitution, and then he's like, "What is uncodified? Not written down." Oh, like
unwritten constitution, no constitution.
Yeah, it's like like secret law or whatever. But that's that. But that's what a liberal democracy is. Basically, parliamentary is your parliament is not within a checks and balances of equal branches. The parliament runs the show. That parliament does what it wants, how it wants.
Well, actually, America runs the UK, so
No, not at all, not at all. Your OSS or the OSS and the intelligence agencies, the handshake that took off after World War II, where basically you gave up your empire and you shifted it onto us through Bretton Woods and all that, and to basically so at the end of the day, the intelligence and the money, all the banks, the money is in the city of London. So it's like you guys only gave up the appearance of power, and put it onto America, but in essence, everything runs through Britain, all these lines of not just influence, but of commerce run through Britain. So yeah, you guys are still running the show in many respects.
Well, if you say so.
Look, you guys even mentioned MI6 to the 1990s. That's something.
Well, yeah, and all the James Bond movies, I guess.
Yeah, that was good propaganda.
But what you were saying earlier sounded like you're starting a new religion for your fellow Americans.
What I'm, in a way, it's I'm creating a conceptual structure to live in, or to look out at the world from. It's the Bible wasn't shifting words when it called it a stronghold, and I'm basically creating a stronghold for them to live in, to occupy, to identify with, and see that as their birthright. Yeah. So
you acknowledge that America doesn't have an official religion, and you're trying to address that omission.
So as I was trying to get at before, we have no official religion, but what the type of government that God would want is one that allows people to follow their conscience, because ultimately God wants you to freely go towards him. And the one type of government that facilitates that the best, because it's the one that is the most conducive to shaping hearts and minds, because there's no threat of coercion or extortion or whatever, is that open system of America. So in an ironic way, there is no official religion, but the fact that it's open-ended, or that people can follow their conscience, is itself inspired by Christianity. So to think of it, there's political inputs and political output. And sometimes people mix these up. And so you could have the political input of understanding that, you know, the world is a certain way and the nature of human beings. That could come from like a theological point of view as an input. But if the output is freedom of speech, so it's like, you know, yeah, I got my idea from, you know, about what humans are from the Bible, input, but the output is speech. You're allowed to speak freely, regardless of whether you believe or not. And so, you know, that distinction matters. And on one side of it, it doesn't matter if there's religious, you know, associations. What matters is the output. And so, you know, like I said, America is the best type of Christian country ultimately, because it's that country that allows people to follow their hearts and minds and allows the gospel and other messages to spread without fear of, you know, retaliation. And if that's it, because God doesn't want, you know, a Christian nation, quote unquote, where everyone is like baptized, you know, by the, you know, on TV or something. And then, you know, they could see God, look at all these people, you know, like, no, he wants your heart. You know, he wants each individual person's heart. He wants, it's a personal God. Like he knows everything about you. He made you, he loves you. He knows how many hairs there are on your head. You know, I mean, it's a beautiful thing when you realize how much God loves you. And the only system that allows people to freely go towards that, to freely, to realize that, to freely explore that, is the American system. And so, yes, is it an American country? Yes and no. Yes for inputs, no for outputs. So is America Christian? In terms of political inputs, it is. But in terms of political outputs, it is not.
Because it doesn't spread Christianity?
Yeah, because
Is that what you mean?
because the outputs have nothing to do with Christianity. So remember, if the input is, you know, a belief about human nature that comes from the Bible, if that's my input, making a law, I would say, but the output is basically you have the right to free speech. Those, you know, it may have had a Christian input, but the output has nothing to do with Christianity, or at least not ostensibly. And so that distinction needs to be acknowledged. And notice that doesn't. So in a way, we have Christian inputs in America, but our outputs are not Christian, or not, you know, on the surface. And so whether that makes us a Christian nation, I think the better way to say this idea of, I think that's a red herring to say whether this is a Christian nation. I think the best thing to say is America is the best nation for Christians. And anybody else, but essentially America is the best kind of nation for Christians.
Have you always been Christian?
No.
When did you become Christian?
So I wrote a 6,000 word article, of course, right, on called How My Soul Broke the Dawn. And I go over, you know, how it happened, but in essence, I was in my, in end of 2016, I was a tomcat, you know. I was more interested in how many girls I could date at the same time than anything to do with God. That's for sure. And I was on Twitter, and there was a D-list internet celebrity, if you want to call that, that followed me, and he posted, and I scrolled past it, and I felt obligated to read it because, you know, I don't know, because he followed me, so I feel like I got obligated to read whatever he posted. And it was a big block of text, so it wasn't just like a regular meme. It was like like a paragraph of text, and there's really no reason why I would have read that in any other situation. It was such a fleeting moment. I could have easily kept rolling and scrolling. But what I end up reading there for the first time ever was an argument, a classical argument for the theistic existence of God that I never came across before. And I was so shocked because I thought I knew about Christianity. I was like, I grew up supposedly a Catholic, but I never, identified with it much. And, and so I thought I knew, and I was, I went through all the Eastern religions, and I still have a bunch of books here on, one of the people I used to like listening to the most was Alan Watts, a fellow Brit.
I've heard of him, yes.
Yeah. And, so
Buddhism. He promoted Buddhism, right?
Yeah, he popularized it, right? And so, he did all that. And I was thinking, so I was so shocked to realize that I don't know anything about Christianity. I thought I did. And I went to all these other religions and Buddhism and Taoism. And, and I thought I knew Christianity. And so for the first time, I realized that, wow, I didn't even know these. And so for the next 6 or 7 months, all I did was basically look into arguments for God, and what I learned ended up becoming what I ended up learning. Basically, I got into what I later learned was called apologetics. And so by 6 or 7 months after the fact, I was like, okay, all right. And then by 2018, which so that would be like a year and a half after that initial point, I kind of just said to myself, it seems like Christ rose from the dead, and that God's real. It's just I acknowledged those things. It wasn't anything crazy. When I acknowledged, it was cold. It was just like if it was a matter of fact. I didn't care really. It was just like, oh, that probably happened. Like you see something for evidence for something, and then you think yourself, yeah, that could be the case, right? And yeah, okay, that's likely. Okay. And so the minute I did that was in the summer of 2018, and I was going to the bank, and on my way, it was like a light switch in my head went off, like almost like the way the difference between light and dark, and the light switch just like immediate. And I had a verse pop into my head, and I was not a Bible reader then. So this was a verse that I heard maybe once, some apologists say once, but I never, I didn't do any reading, I didn't do Bible reading. But a verse came into my head, and that verse was essentially, you have a heart of stone, and I'm going to give you a new heart of flesh. And when I heard that, I thought to myself real quick, yeah, I heard that before. And when I first heard it before, I didn't think much of it. I actually probably thought of it too concretely, like actual stone heart, and then the process of stone turning into flesh. And I was, dumb. But at that point, for the first time, I realized, oh my God, this is about being jaded. This is about cutting yourself off from the world so nothing could touch your heart. And God's saying, I know you've been hurt. I know you've been let down. I know that heart's been broke. So now you don't let anything touch it because you're afraid of being broken again. And he's like, I'm going to give you a new heart. That's not only like give you a fresh one, but it's going to be resilient, and it's going to be, a satisfying, robust love. And that was the point the Holy Spirit first came into my heart. I didn't know it then. I learned that several years later, but that's the first part, Holy Spirit, because that's what the Holy Spirit does. He illuminates, he gives you knowledge, he gives you understanding. And I just said, okay, that's kind of cool. All right. I mean, that was the first time I felt God as a person. I guess before that, I thought of God as like a state of mind, a level, a status. But at that point, I realized God's a person, and just like a person has like ideas and will and intentions and memories and
God is a man, Jesus.
Well, yeah, that yeah, absolutely. But because remember, I was reading a lot of religious stuff on the Eastern side, and it was, for them, God is more like, a light switch. I mean, like electricity current or something like the way the Star Wars sees the Force.
The Force.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very unique for me to at that point to realize God can be a person. I never considered it before then. And so that was unique, but I didn't convict myself to anything. I just thought that was very strange and very, very heartwarming too, actually, very touching. And then a couple of weeks later, I was walking in my backyard, and I was going to my garage, and immediately another verse came into my head. Again, I wasn't reading the Bible regularly. I may have heard this verse once or twice before in out of context or something. And yet I heard it very clearly. And it was basically from John 14. And he's saying, by the way, that first verse about the heart of stone, that comes from Old Testament, Jeremiah. But this one was actual words from Jesus. And it was, I know the world, I'm paraphrasing now, but essentially it's, I know the world hates you. I know you never were part of the world, that the world has rejected you. Know that before the world rejected you, the world rejected me. Because you're not of this world. You're not its product. You belong to me. If you were of this world, they would love you, they would accept you, they would bring you in. But you're not. You belong to me. So they shun you, they reject you, they cut you off. And that was the first time in my life that I ever felt accepted by anybody. Ever. I was, I was always and still am in some respect to some people, just a problem, something to deal with. No one wants me here or there. It's just, we, deal with it. Maybe you feel pity, maybe you feel obligated, but still, it's just it's putting up with this. And that was the first time in my whole life that I felt like someone was like, "You're with me. You're my group."
Yes, you're in my gang, something like that.
I mean, it's a little bit of a crass way to put it, but that you are with me, and essentially, again, I was not a regular reader of the Bible. I was not a reader of the Bible at all, and yet this verse comes in, and so that was the point at which I said, "Okay, Jesus, I'm yours. I'm all for it." Like,
The Holy Spirit entered you.
No, that was the a couple of weeks before that, when I learned about the heart of flesh, the new heart of flesh. When I realized that about the verse, that's when the Holy Spirit came in. But Jesus himself came at that point, because those were his words, and that's, he spoke directly to me. I mean, he grabbed me. He says, I know no one's ever freaking liked you. It's because I own you. You're with me. You're not of this world in that way, because the world would have loved you. And I didn't realize how I'm not say supernatural, but how serendipitous that was, at the time. But in like 2020, a couple of years after that, I was writing about my experience in that article, and I realized, oh my God, these were clear verses which is like that's the real deal. People say, oh, how do you know if it's God or not? Well, God wrote and has a voice, and essentially the verses are his voice, and that's his voice. Boom, being applied in a way that's wholly unique. Or very unique to me. Speak almost like it's speaking to me directly, not like all this is about me. No, it's like directly. This is, I'm talking to you, like God, almost like in the second person, like, I'm going to give you a new heart. You're not of this world. You're with me. I mean, that is, and then my prayer life didn't start till like end of 2020. And that's been kicking off beautifully, because you realize that once God wants you to ask for things, and the things that I've asked for, he's given. And it's put me in a situation where I'm kind of scared to ask, because I know that if I ask, it's, it's almost like let's say you want to lose weight or something, and you know that, okay, if you make a determination that you're going to lose weight, that means that's when you start losing weight, right? It's like a big deal, and you know you want to lose weight, but at the same time you're like, oh, I want to keep eating crap.
Well, I mean, ideally, you want to eat
something that's So if I say, God, free me of this or put me on this track, that means that I'm going to start doing that, and that means if I'm enjoying something else, that thing is probably going to be interrupted, let's say, and I'm going to be pushed in that direction. And so I'm a little like apprehensive to ask, but I'm asking more and more though to him.
Mm-hmm. And, may we know what you asked for that was granted to you?
So, I mean, not nothing necessarily material, but so I asked him at the end of 2020 to allow my will to become his will, so that everything I desire is something that he desires, and so that basically my desires are aligned with his.
So that's great.
My will, is like, so it's basically, make me the person you want me to be. And a couple of weeks after that is when I had that little, that Supreme Court decision happened, and that's when I started writing about American exceptionalism. Was a couple of weeks after that.
So sorry, which Supreme Court decision happened?
The one with where half the states were said that they didn't have standing in a national election. So after the 2020 election, half the states, about 26 of them or so, got together and had a lawsuit saying, hey, a lot of these like swing states that stopped their voting and all that stuff, they had not just irregularities, but they broke their own law. And so if that's the case, then that puts into jeopardy their product, because if we agree that we're all going to follow our own state laws and then turn in ballots, and there's a state not doing that, then that's a problem. And so when I saw that the Supreme Court said those states have no standing, I expected the Supreme Court to take the case and then find some technicality and then throw it out. But instead, they didn't even have it, because they said that these states had no standing, which was scary to me, because it's like, what do you mean? How do half the states in the union don't have standing with regard to a national election? I mean, that makes no sense. If anyone has standing, it's the states, it's the people that are, or the states that are in the election.
Yes. If they don't have standing, who does?
That's a great question, right? But that all happened a couple of weeks after I asked God to make the will. Okay, I mean, look, the problem with me saying exactly is because it's a lot of personal stuff.
Yes.
So, okay, I understand. I have to be a little vague. Like, there was something that was really bothering me about, and I asked God to please try to grant me peace from it, and so that I could eventually instead glorify you better. And that thing doesn't bother me that much anymore, even though it's, I'm not going to say worse than ever, but much more further along, let's say, much more progressed than, so, by stretch, I should be even more mad, but I'm not. So, there's that. And like I said, when I said there's real power there, like, if I say, okay, you know what, that, please help me with this. That means that let's say if I have a little like stupid hobby or something that might end because now I'm going to be doing this. So it's like when I ask, it's the real deal. And he wants you to ask because this is all about, remember, God wants your will, wants you voluntary, wants you jump. People say, why would you want a God that wants you to, that forces you to worship him or demands that you worship him? And it's like, do you go to your favorite concert and like get excited and jump up and down and sing along and all that stuff? Yeah. Why do you do that? Because it's worthy of it, because it's great. I mean, it's an amazing music, amazing band. It's like, well, God's like that in the sense that no one's being forced to desire him or to worship him. Instead, you behold him and his majesty, and you realize, wow, everything you could think of plus a million plus infinity. Every conception you have of what's justice or what's loving or what's right. He's the source of that. All of our values in those respects are just abstractions of his singular or in this case trisingular personality. He's just those are his personality traits, and we just abstract them into certain values and idioms or norms and such. Like don't steal or don't kill or what have you. It's his character that sets the standard,
Yes.
And so when you realize that, you meditate on that, you study that, you realize how worthy he is. And it's just like if you heard a really great song, you're like, wow, whether it's like, oh, they're so virtuoso, or man, that's a great guitar tone, or wow, it's so catchy. You get excited, you get you praise it, and then on top of that, you got this guy Jesus, where basically that's where everything comes together, like the literal cross between the divine and the earthly, and he is like there's something, everyone can find something to adore about him, to find worthy of worship. I mean, for me, it's his ability to flip people on their heads in arguments through questions. He wouldn't get mad at people or call them stupid, or he would call people fools and stuff, but he wouldn't rely on that for his argumentation. People would come up to him with like challenges about things, and he would say, yeah, but what about this? And they would just be like so it's like in a way calling out their assumptions. And so that was my God. He was a master at that form of argumentation. Brilliant man, and then on top of that, he told jokes. The whole idea of like, get the speck out of your brother's eye, or don't get the, before you get the speck out of your brother's eye, get the log out of your own eye. You realize that's how absurd that is. And you realize it's comical. Really, a log in your eye? It's a joke.
Well, it's the pot calling the kettle black, I guess the English would say.
No, but that's where that comes from, So he is the source of all these things, and do to others as you would like to be done to you, and all that stuff comes from Christ, all of it. And it's to think of him as just a teacher is to kind of denounce what he said he was, because he said he was the Son of God. He said he wasn't just an ordinary human being. He said he was Lord. So if you're like, well, I'm going to go just with the teachings, but nothing else. Well, it's like, well, if they're such great teachings, where do you think that came from? If this guy's literally claiming to be God, but it's like, I don't know. Yeah, but he literally rose from the dead, which is probably the best way to prove that you are God, that you are not just because everyone is succumbed by death. We're all mortal. And yet if you have someone literally raised back up in a glorified body, then you could probably believe them when they tell you, yeah, I'm the God of the universe. To be real frank, if the Bible and the knowledge of Christianity was the same for the most part, with the exception that there was no Christ, there was no embodiment, no atonement, or not atonement, I'm sorry, embodiment, what's the word that they use? Incarnation. That there was no incarnation. But it was basically the same beyond that. Let's say a lot of stuff that Paul did or whatever. I would not trust it, because it's like, okay, all right, especially given given that my tomcat tendencies, that it would be like, wait, I gotta give up, all those kind of promiscuousness and all that stuff. It's like I'd probably just say no. Okay, that's a nice story, And then on top of that, there's a paranoia aspect of like, yeah, okay, but what if I, had my whole life, or I did it the way you wanted, and then I realized at the end you were just like harvesting energy from me, or just stealing something from me, or you're just duping me, and that I wasted my whole life now because I followed you, right? Christ demolishes all that because he, in his incarnation, died on the cross. And he basically, in a way, shows that this is how much I love you. I'm willing to go through something I did not have to go through, but I'm willing to go through it. And his sacrifice was unlike any other in history, because he did so for his enemies. He did so knowing how bad it was going to be, and he did so for people that, most importantly, don't deserve it. A bunch of cowards, a bunch of like Peter. Remember Peter? He said, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the roosters crow. And so, and he did. Even though Peter was the fucking leader of the apostles, he literally denied him 3 times. So that's the type of like bullshit that humans are, and yet how undeserving we are, and yet he did it for us. That's why at the Garden of Gethsemane he was sweating so much that some people think he was sweating blood, because he was scared. Knowing how much pain he was about to go through. But then he says right there, God, take this cup from me, so that not my will, but your will is done. And he tells the Father, please, give me that courage. Courage to what? To have you forsake me. I mean, this is not someone who wants to rule you. This is not someone who wants to manipulate you and to hurt you. This is someone who truly loves you in a way that you can't even imagine. That in a way that you can't even love yourself. To yourself. I mean, he loves you more than you love yourself. I mean, it's just, And the beautiful thing about, especially with the Holy Spirit, is as you develop and grow in Christ, you realize that all those scars you got your whole life, all those things that happened to you that you saw as setbacks or just humiliations or just like mean things or whatever, you realize what their place was and why that all happened, and what power it gives you now. Like, oh, I developed that sensibility, or I get like, let's say you had a bad parent, right? And you're like, oh, now you realize that person, let's say my father never listening to me, or never paying, like, if I had fucking finger painting, he just never cared about it, right? Never put it on the fridge. That grew a resilience in me. I'm not saying that happened to me, but I'm just saying like that the Holy Spirit would like make you realize, oh, that grew resilience in me, so that now I could be more stoic or more tough or less self-interested. Paul has something about this when he says that he had a thorn in his flesh that he asked God to remove 3 times, and that God told him, my grace is sufficient. So then he says, it's most likely that this thorn in my flesh is here to stop me from getting too cocky, stop me from getting too conceited. Yeah. So that kind of power where God didn't take away the pain of the thorn, but now your interpretation of it is completely flipped. And it goes from this problem to, okay, I get it now. I know why it's here. And as human beings, our level, that power of interpretation, I mean, that's what people call mind over matter and stuff. I mean, because it's all how you interpret things. And if you interpret it differently and you have a context for it, it changes the way you perceive it and the way you handle it and all that. So that kind of power is it's so complete. The Christianity is so complete. It is what you were made for. It was like literally, it's you are a created being. You're a manufacturer made you and has instructions and everything. And everything in the world becomes illuminated. I mean, C.S. Lewis had a quote, another British, C.S. Lewis. He said, "I know Christianity is true like I know the sun is in the sky, not just because I can see it, but because by it I see all others. So all else, I see everything else." And that's exactly the kind of illumination, because it's not just like, wow, this is really cool, this is really true. You kind of pick up your head after gazing at it, and you look around, and everything is like now transformed. And again, this is that's what new creation means. That's what it means. Another great Brit, the guy who wrote N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright, I love his lectures. He talks about this new creation. Paul talks a lot about moving in the direction of the flesh versus moving in the direction of the spirit. And it's not just this carnal desire thing, but it's like literally there's something. What spirit really is just the movement of matter. That's all it is. So if you move your hand around, right, in a certain direction, the molecules and the atoms in your hand are still there, but they don't tell you what direction, like just like what it's made out of doesn't tell you what direction it moves in. That's something else. That's something else that acts beyond its structure to move it in a certain direction. And so spirit is essentially that. That's why spirit, the word, goes back to a breath, or in Hebrew, ruach. So basically like the breath you take, the animating breath, or the way the wind shapes the sand dunes and things like that. Just this animating process, this continue. And so that spirit, when you move in that spirit, you're basically moving in a certain direction according to a certain ideal, and in a kind of like higher dimensional way. When you do what God wants you to do, you're essentially in a higher dimensional way moving in his direction. You may not see it, like, because you're just sitting there, right? But on a higher plane, on a higher dimensional level, you're moving kind of like a what do you call that loop that they make where you go from 2D to 3D. I forgot that Mobius strip. Like just like a Mobius strip, where if you're just on the strip itself, you feel like you're just going in a straight line. But if you gaze out and you look in 3 dimensions, you realize that what felt like a straight line was really looping and jumping looping around through the second through the 3rd dimension. And so in that same way, when you move in the direction of God over time, even if you're just sitting there, you're actually moving in his direction, actually getting closer to him. And so sin is about missing that mark, and you're moving in a different direction from God. Because remember, everything has to be voluntary. You have to go to God. He wants you to come to him in that way. He doesn't want to come at the foot of your bed when you're waking up in the morning and say, "Worship me." Because then at that point, you're not going to have a choice. You'll be scared out of your mind. You wouldn't know what to do. You think this guy's going to kill me if I say, if I do anything but what he said. I mean, so that's why God gives you space where you can literally, do whatever you want, and be at a point where you may not even feel guilt about it, because he's not there looking around the corner. And and shit gets real bad, but he gives you that. And yet he wants to give you that fucking space. And so the spirit moving in that direction, the sin is just you missing that mark. And so it's not so much that like, oh, you dig gay stuff, you go to hell. Instead, it's like, being straight doesn't send you to heaven either, right? What it is the seed that sent you to hell wasn't the gay thing. That's just an outgrowth of it. It's so bad, but it's an outgrowth of it. What it all relates back to is self-righteousness. You essentially believe you know better than your creator. That I know he says this, but I really want this, and I don't care, And whatever reason you think of, whether I don't care what he says or I think better, it's that idea of like, I do me, not you, self-righteousness. And that's the source of sin. That's the source of all sin, whether it be adultery or gayness, or that's the source of it all. And so that moving in the Spirit is very important, and that's what the Holy Spirit really does help you with. Is that it's helping you go in that direction. It's almost like if you're running a marathon, the Holy Spirit's like alongside you, giving you the little water cups, the little Gatorades, and wiping the sweat off, and saying, go down this trail, not that trail, or whatever. That's literally what it's the word in Greek, right, is a paraclete, and that means para, like alongside with, right, like paralegal, paramedic, right, alongside, and then cleat means like to shout or to call out. So he's basically with you shouting, with you calling out, with you shouting. Basically, he's your counsel. You could, literally calling him. So it's so complete, so freaking beautiful. I don't see why they can't make companies in the image of God. We could easily say, okay, the father, that'll be executive branch or whatever, right? CEOs and stuff. The son, that would be the strategy branch. They're the guys figuring out how to get. So the executive branch determines the goals. Let's say the wisdom branch or the Jesus branch determines how to get to those goals. And then finally, the Holy Spirit branch of the company would be concerned with solely maintaining that, like facilitating that process. So they would like almost like something more than human resources, to make sure that the people that are going along that path towards that goal are doing so efficiently, or doing so, not killing themselves, or, in a sustainable way. And maybe they do run companies like that already. I just thought like, hey, you could have like something like that. But whatever. Yeah. Yeah, I love God. I want everyone else to know how great He is. I mean, honestly, I think if you follow your conscience, you'll probably see the new heavens and new earth, which is heaven. It's just that why would you want to wait, a million extra years, or 10 million extra years, or even a billion years more to become new creation, to go into that, to start living in that kingdom, to start building that kingdom, which is essentially what was going to be the heaven, as what people believe. People think of as what people think of as heaven. So why would you want to wait a million years, or who knows how long more, until the second coming, when you could start now? You could start living that beautiful eternity, empowering this today, and that so by the time the new heavens and new earth come together, your role is going to be so involved, versus like you're just like a little newborn baby, like just don't know what's going on, like now you have to learn how to walk and talk all over again or something, in that way. Versus you're so involved, you hit the ground running. You're literally like you're part of the staff now or something. Like you're literally that involved. You're bringing things together, and I just say that. Why would you want to be in like a neutral zone for another million years, where you feel aimless or you don't have a sense of real purpose, when you could have that now, today, and it's going to last eternity? And eternity is eternity, and the way God set it up for us is we're going to be going and moving in His direction forever. And given that He's eternal, it'll never end. We're just going to constantly get better and better. And I mean, and Paul even says we're going to get to a point where we will judge angels. We will tell angels whether you're a good angel, you're a bad angel, because we're going to be always moving in that direction, always getting more and more in His image, more and more powerful for His sake, more and more glorified or reflecting of His glory for His sake. Constant, forever, just never ending. Just like a euphoria that just gets better and better and better and better, and just doesn't end, doesn't stop. And you could literally like start that like a lot sooner, like this lifetime now, and yet you want to wait till, the parousia or whatever, the second coming. You want to wait till then? And that could be 10 million years from now. That could be 10 billion years from now. That could be tomorrow. But why wait, And you want to know something really, really, I guess I could say scandalous, or might get me in trouble. But I mean, I don't have trouble with it, but it would a lot of people yell about it. But I've had two near death experiences. One before I was a Christian, and the other after I became a Christian. And the two experiences comport well with what we know from theology. And I'm going to tell you that I'm confident that I saw what people see when they die, and that you don't want to go there. I mean, you don't want to go. I mean, where I was, and I had the experiences about 10 years apart. So, I'm in my early 20s. I had the first experience, nothing to do with God in my heart, no Holy Spirit, nothing. Just, that's in the middle of me doing the Eastern religion stuff. I was probably like, reading about like Zen or something. And then, about, February of 2 years ago, boom, this is already, I'm already in the middle of Christ, and the experience, and it's just like completely different. And I mean, and it all comports, and if that first time is what everyone's going to believe. And look, again, if you follow your conscience, it may very well be the case that if you go to that world I went to the first time around, you may eventually see the new heavens and new earth after 1,000,000 years or whatever. But what I'm saying is, why would you want to go there? Why would you want to be there for 1,000,000 years? I mean, it's no good. It's and my experiences were real, because they're not just a dream. I mean, let's just say they were chemically induced in a way that, because our mind is chemical, and so literally you move some chemicals around, and, you can literally just, have your consciousness decouple from the body. And, because essentially what's coupling the body to the consciousness is essentially a process of like, the antagonism of the NMDA receptor, along with the action at the serotonin synapse. This creates a reality, and then when we interfere with it, we could basically move out of our. Actually, if Robitussin and cough syrup, that actually that actually removes people from the body, and it's called dissociative, like ketamine. CIA loves that shit, right? Anyway, yeah. So I had these two experiences, and they were, like I said, the first one was absolutely terrifying, and then the second one was the opposite. It was comforting. It's like taking a big, long stretch. Like, when you've been sitting for a long time and you stand up and you get that long stretch. It was like that, but it's ongoing. But before I say, I want to get a drink real quick, and so give me like 30 seconds or so. Yeah. Sorry, I gotta get some. All right.
Yes.
No, I'm here. I just had to get something to drink.
Yeah, I think I might have dozed off.
No, I was just gonna say because I had these two near-death experiences before and after becoming a Christian, and
Right.
I just wanted to. I thought it'd be cool to share because it's. I believe it's what's going to happen to people when they die, and you don't want to go where I went, and
But believing helps to avoid hell.
I believe everyone that follows their conscience will end up in the new heavens and new earth. But why wait a million years to the second coming when you could start now?
But what about other religions? Have you considered other religions?
All over, yeah. Like I said, that was one of the things that shocked me was how much I thought I knew about Christianity. I got all these books here. They're just random. So I got a lot of these books of Eastern religion. I got a lot of first editions. I got books. So I was reading all that, and I thought I knew about Christianity, and I didn't. So yeah, I did consider a lot of other religions, but and I was also still am into psychedelics and very interested in psychedelics, and so in like 2010 or so, 2009, at the end of the noughties, I had an experience with nitrous oxide, and which the Brits know pretty well about.
Is it laughing gas?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you don't know, laughing gas is a dissociative, which essentially it's a very simple molecule, but it interrupts the receptor site at the NMDA receptor site, and that causes, for in a nutshell, a decoupling of the awareness from the physical body. And this is why these drugs, like ketamine is an example of them, are used in surgery, because you don't feel your body anymore, and so they could operate and all that stuff. So I had the nitrous oxide, and I went into a world where it was all static, and I did not know how I got there. I was actually contemplating whether a bomb dropped on my house, because I had no recollection of doing the nitrous or anything. I just end up in this world that's just static, and I have no body. But at the same time, even though I have no body, I feel like I'm being held down, like being bound, like almost stapled or something, nailed, really. And it felt like it was right above my forehead, around here, and right in my sternum, like that, like these 2 points. Again, I had no body, but every time I had the will to move, I would feel these two things, and they were kind of reminding me, you can't move. It was just static. Just almost like you have like the TV in between channels or something. Just constant gray static, and my thoughts were almost kind of like rolling out from me and billowing out and echoing out forever, so that I could see stuff I was thinking 20 minutes before that, just echoing out further. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest. I was crying out for my mother. I was literally crying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," like, because I didn't know what the hell was going on. That's how shit scared I was. I said, I don't want anyone to go there. And I felt this sense of being alone, being held down, and being in a place just nothing. It's just, it was literally like visual white noise, everything. And I was basically just there, just like screaming, and then thinking, how the hell, thinking I died. And slowly I came back. I started to see the first thing I saw were my jeans, and then the rest of the world, and I was happy. But essentially, my consciousness came back. It came coupled back, and so I believe that's what's going to happen if someone dies without Christ. You're going to go to that static world until the second coming. And again,
a kind of purgatory where it's
no,
like
no,
that forever.
everyone's going there. No, everyone's going there. The no, I wouldn't call it purgatory because it's pretty hellish. I mean, because it's just so. I mean, you're gone. Everything's you're completely isolated. You're literally like hung on a shelf in a way. I mean, it's almost like you're a robot. You've been turned off, and but yet you still have the awareness, and you're just but you're there on the shelf, just like So it's insane. And yet, so you don't want to go there. But about 2 years ago, so yeah, I came out of there and I was so happy to see my pants and see my legs again. But so I believe everyone's good. It doesn't matter if you're like Gandhi or Charles Manson. You're going to go to that static realm. Now the question is, what if you have Christ? Well, that I answered that question about 2-3 years ago, where I like I said, I'm not. Nitrous is this kind of weird chemical, and once in a while, like maybe once every couple of years, I'll take a balloon, right? Because it's look, the Brits did it, in the early 1800s. It was fun, but so I did it, and I basically went into that same place where my body was decoupled, but the experience was completely different. So where the first one felt like just an abrupt change, where everything is like normal, then next thing you know, just static world, and how the hell did I get here, and nothing makes sense. Instead, it was almost like a zooming out, like of my position, where you see those things where they zoom out on the Earth, and then you see the solar system, but it wasn't like physical. It was like a zooming out conceptually, right? So that like concepts and I was zooming out to the point where I was seeing like the ultra concept, like the concept of all concepts, and it was a polarity, right? So you see the two ends, and you see this oscillation back and forth between those two ends, and it's getting faster and faster and faster as I'm zooming out, and then it starts getting so fast. You know what? Like when a fan or rims, they get so fast that they look like they're moving slow. Yeah, you see that like it with you see it with like ceiling fans or something where it's moving really fast, but it kind of looks like it's slow. Right? It was like getting at that point where it's going real slow, and then as it's slowing down, there's this kind of milky vapor, a very white milky vapor, very silky, just kind of cleaning off, just slowly coming out of it, just being like almost like it's being extracted. It's not it doesn't even look like it's on fire. It's just slowly, softly billowing outward. It looks like whatever that silky, smooth smoke was inside that oscillation, and it's just being pulled out. And I'm watching it. And I realize what I'm looking at. And no, I don't realize what I'm looking at. I hear basically a voice tell me, but that voice was like my own voice, but it was basically like, that's God. And I'm like, wow. And it was just, like I said, soft, quiet, graceful, just real. It wasn't like smoke. It was like denser to smoke. It was almost like floating silk or something. And I realize as I'm zooming out, right? Still zooming out. I realize that I'm zooming out into darkness behind me. And now I feel like I'm in like the middle of space where, like everything's dark and there's no static, but it's all dark. But the darkness feels velvetly. And I feel like eventually after being zooming out, I feel like I was being projected like a cannonball, and like I was being caught in a net. And where I landed in the net, I just softly just fell into it. I didn't like roll down or anything. I just almost like I stuck to it. But very soft, real gentle. It wasn't like, like a violent catch. It was very soft, very gentle. And it was velvetly blackness. And again, I had no body. But when I had the will to move, instead of feeling those two dots that were holding me down, now I felt like I was stretching out, but constant stretching, like just like a never ending stretch. I mean, everyone loves stretching, but that feeling of just stretch and then it's over, just no, it doesn't end. And it's
What,
just
like that character in Fantastic Four? The Fantastic Four?
oh yeah. Yes, but not because that seems a little violent. It wasn't. It
Okay.
didn't hurt. It felt like just like you got up and stretched, but it was just never ends.
Mhm.
And it's that relief, but just constant, and like I guess a bliss. And I feel like like a star in the velvet night sky. Like I'm just like one of these stars now, no body, but with the awareness. But now I'm like in a star, and then there's other stars, and we're all in this like beautiful constellation. And then there in the center of our vision is the silky white flowing silk that is essentially identified as God, just moving up, and just this feeling of relaxation, of just like the way you feel when you're stretching. It's just carefree, relaxed, like but constant, like it's I mean, again, I had no body, but I felt like it was just constant, like instead of feeling like confined like I did the first time, it felt like instead of having no body, it felt like just my body just kept expanding. Although I identified with like being a little dot, but I didn't feel confined. I felt almost expanded. It was weird, because again, I had no body, but I didn't feel like confined. I didn't feel like stuck in this little thing. I felt like, again, it's like when you know how they say when you are sitting down, you don't think about your butt. Like you don't think about like your butt sitting, and then you can notice it, right? You're like, oh shit, I'm sitting down, right? Like something there.
Yeah.
It's like that in the sense where I'm looking at the vapor, not thinking about my body, and then if I go to think about my body, I feel that stretching feeling. So it's not confined. Yeah. And in relaxation, there were people with me. There were other conscious. I didn't communicate, but they were. I could tell they were in the same kind of position I was, just like caught in this beautiful velvet, and it was dark, very dark, but like velvet dark. And then and so after learning theology, I realized that's heaven. Essentially, before the new creation begins, where literally like we're going to have a restored earth. We basically hang out with God until the parousia, or the second coming. We basically just hang out with him. And so when Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," that's that paradise, that feeling where I had no body, because body's dead, right? It got to be resurrected later, but I'm with God. And I'm with God for as long as it takes. If it's 1,000,000 other years, because and like I said, it was like the most comforting, most beautiful thing. I felt at peace, at home, not at home, but just like I belong, like I could hang out here. Like, like really, like when you go to like a friend's house or something, you don't plan on like staying the night or anything, but you're a little tired, and he has this big comfy couch, and you go to sit on the couch. It's like that couch. It's not at all like going to bed or anything, so it's very temporary in that sense. It feels temporary, but it just feels like I'm just going to park here for a little while and just relax. And yeah, and obviously I couldn't stay for long because the chemicals start to change, and then the brain processes go back to normal. So but I could only imagine if I stood there, like I could have tried communicating, or try. Although I wouldn't want to do that, but just explore. Like there was, it didn't feel confining, and whereas the other world, the first time around, that again, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I mean, that's just too much. I mean, it's really scary because it's so abrupt, and everything is gone. Everyone.
So you had a bad trip and you had a good trip.
Well, the one in 2011 or not 20, in 2009 was a bad trip. I went to the static world, the place you go without Christ when you die. But the one I had two or 3 years ago was a good trip, because I got to see where you go when you die, when you're with God, when you're in Christ. And the only similarity was I had no body, but it was worlds different. And I can't help but think about the passage of Lazarus and the rich man, how, there's this gulf between them, and yet they could speak to one another. And I wonder, like, man, so we're going to be in this blissful state, and there's going to be a bunch of people in the static world that are just going to be like terrified. It's like, that's sad,
Yes.
That's sad. But eventually, of those people in the static world, once you go to judgment, if you're someone who followed your conscience, and you try to really do the right thing, and not internally, you knew the things that are right, and you tried to do them. You'll see new creation. You'll, just like I said, you're gonna have to wait a long time, and then when it finally comes around, you're gonna have you're just going to be learning how to walk, and as opposed to hitting the ground running and being involved with big projects and constructions of our new heavens and new earth. I mean, the whole universe is ours. Will be ours to grow, to create, to do so many things. And technology, fun. Whether it be like we're going to ride comets or create black holes to make black holes fight each other. I mean, there's so many things, and it's all going to be in His glory and His name, and He's going to be there with us, and we're going to be ruling creation on behalf of God, like ambassadors for Him. Literally, this is going to be our realm, and we're going to be ruling this realm.
I think Mormon beliefs are include having a planet to rule or something.
Yes, but the difference there is that for them it's very allocated. Like we're not guaranteed a planet, right? We just know that we'll have new creation to be with. But the Mormons are very specific, where they say not only will you have a planet, but you're going to have endless celestial sex. Which you realize Joseph Smith was like 14 or 15 when he wrote this. And you realize, like, oh, endless celestial sex. Oh, yeah, the fucking high school kid wrote this. Yeah, of course he did. I mean, like, of course you'd think like that would be the be all end all. Something like something so carnal as that. But that's Mormonism. By the way, is not Christianity. It says it's Christianity, but it really isn't.
It's a form of Christianity.
Not at all. Not at all. You see, the 20th century had this ecumenical movement, and while it didn't succeed at bringing all the religions or the denominations together, what it did succeed in doing is teaching us about orthodoxy. It was small o orthodoxy, so that now we know, okay, here are the core traditions that are biblical, and here is the ideaphora, or all the stuff that is just superfluous stuff that it could go either way, right? But here's the core. And so if you need to be Christian, you have to have all these necessary beliefs. They're not sufficient beliefs, but you need all these necessary beliefs. So, for instance, a necessary belief is that Jesus Christ is God, and you died and He rose from the dead and died for our sins. That's a necessary belief. A sufficient belief, or one that could change, is something like, how does baptism work? Do you baptize when they're adult? Do you baptize as a baby? Do you baptize at all? All those things, although you probably should baptize, but anyway, but that kind of like doctrine, that kind of those things are ideaphora. They could go one, and that's the beauty of what God did for us. What you realize is a lot of the denominations ultimately, although they may not think of themselves as this, they are ultimately differences in worship styles. There's different ways of worshiping God. God is infinite God. So if you're someone who's like in the intellectual philosophy head like me, there's a way of approaching, like, let's say, theology heavy. Versus if you're someone who's like a bleeding heart, you love helping people, you want to see people do, you got the social gospel, you got basically like charity and stuff like that. So everyone has their own way of worshiping God, and because God is so glorified and He so multifaceted, and I mean that's His glory, that's His sovereignty to have all these different forms of worship towards Him. But there is a core, and that core, like I said, is basically what was uncovered as what we call Christian orthodoxy with small o, and so Christ is God, Jesus rose from the dead, the Trinity,
The Nicene Creed and all that.
Yeah, yes. Not all the creeds, but Nicene Creed would be, the Apostles' Creed. Yeah, these are all examples of that all Christian communities share. And then there's, and then from that you have secondary things, and so it's the beauty that he's given us so many options, so many ways of being with him and sharing him and loving him, and humans are not broken in ultimate sense. We are broken without him. We're like a dislocated joint without God.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the things that seem like contradictions about us, and when we think about ourselves in his light, and as our lives in service to him, and as we were created, we realize that there is no contradiction. There is no paradox in human life, or those, you think you have a conflicting desires or interests. No. It was only done outside the will of God. When you were in the will of God, you realize everything has its purpose. Everything has its place. Everything. Mm-hmm. There is no defect. The only defect is the direction you're moving, whether towards God or away from God. But in terms of like your constitution, your body, all that stuff, there is no defect. So, God makes people whole because he is your manufacturer, and you need to follow the manufacturer's instructions.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you?
The instruction manuals, yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because if he created you, right, like, it makes sense. I mean, I didn't create myself, what do I know, right? But, here he is, the guy who created me, and he's like, this is the way I made you, and we're made for joy. We're made for love. We're made to learn. We're made for life and thriving and beauty and justice and goodness. That's why we crave it so much. It's not just a cosmic fucking joke that we would crave something like justice and, there's no such thing around us. No, there is such a thing. It's driving history. It's bringing us out of animal-like to become more and more and more like God, more and more like the source of eternity. That person who is the source of eternity, is the source of all things. He loves you. He made you in an intimate way, and he wants you to know him. And yet, still to this day, I have not joined the church. So I got all this. You see, let's just say I'm intelligent. Let's just say, so I'm able to learn a lot of stuff, even though I have horrible ADD, and I've learned so much Christian doctrine that when I started trying to go into a church a couple of months ago, I realized how so many of them do such a bad job at discipleship. You have one job, is to make people more like Christ. And yet there's all this hypocrisy on the table, and defiantly so, not just normal hypocrisy, but just defiantly so. And also timidness in the sense of, well, we don't even know if we're really important, and it's just like with the Americans who don't get how special America is. It's the same thing. And so if I would have, the minute Christ would have came into my heart, and if I would have went to the Presbyterian church down the street, I would have not been 100th as a disciple as I am now.
Have you explored Islam by any chance?
Yeah, I actually have a Quran here.
Oh, right.
Yeah. When I was middle school and early high school, all my friends were Palestinians. With the Habibis and the Shemutas and, all this kind of shit that, we learned to say. But they were Palestinian. And like I said, my mom has that background in Syria. So, that's I guess where we connected, but yeah, I've learned a lot about Islam, but I've learned a lot about it from David Wood.
Well, that's probably not the best place to learn about Islam.
But what do you call it? I know they talk about Isa, and there's a lot of love for Isa, but there's this belief that Isa didn't really die on the cross; he just appeared to die. But that kind of supports this idea of God lying and trying to deceive people, and I don't believe God can lie. I think.
Well, the thing is, the
Yeah.
New Testament isn't from God. I mean, that's not what Christians claim.
It's inspired by God. So it basically, when that pen or papyrus or whatever moved, it moved in the direction of God. So in that sense, it was done inspired. When it comes to whether it's infallible, this guy, Michael Heiser had a great point. He says that's almost a red herring to say whether it's inspired. I mean, whether it's infallible. Instead, all you need to say is what was the intention of the author, and did they get across their intention? Did they accomplish that? And that's it. There's the Bible is not a science book. It's not supposed to have super knowledge of like things that secret knowledge of the universe or whatever. It's just supposed to be the writings of people that have been inspired by Jesus, that have seen Jesus directly, and want to communicate that spirit and that gospel in a way that is ultimately sufficient for all good works. So that you could rely on it for basically knowing what is good and evil and correcting yourself. And yeah.
But doesn't Islam offer that as well?
Yeah, but Christianity did so before, and also this it's an addition. So in the Paul tells us that the gospel basically is completed there, and so he says if anyone comes with another gospel, So, for instance, if there was someone who called themselves Christian and said, "I just got a new revelation from God, and this, we're going to do this now," like Joseph Smith. No, there is no more new revelations. And when he died on the cross, all that pain, all that suffering wasn't for nothing. He didn't just do it just to show off, look at all the pain I could take. Like you saw in Passion of the Christ. No, that was for a very important reason, the most important reason. And so that's where it all hangs. That's where it's done. That's where the world, if the world had an axis, that's where it rests, right there on Christ, on the cross. That's where he put the weight on everything. And so that means something. And so to say that you come later, or someone comes later and says, "I got this new revelation," that's to say Christ's work wasn't enough. So it was like, okay, thanks for the suffering, thanks for taking all that for us, but we still need more. It wasn't enough though. That's fucking ridiculous. It's more than enough. That's why he went so low, because he wanted to catch any human being. He wanted to make sure that it doesn't matter how deep you are in your self-righteous sin, how deep you are in you've done horrible things, and you've done, and you feel so far away from God, so far away from what's good. And you just there's nothing that good would ever want to do with me. And good would never want to see me, and all that. And it's like Christ went deep in his pain and on the cross to make sure that no matter how deep you dive, how far you go, he'll be beneath you to catch you up. So he's always there. Doesn't matter how far you go, he's always there, farther than you, so he could catch you. And love. That's basically the story of God. The whole story is really creation and redemption. It's creation going wayward, and God putting himself into creation, having a body so he can live the exact same life we have, the same temptations, the same pain, same suffering, the same anxieties, all of that. He dealt with all of that. Everything you've dealt with and more, he's dealt with as a first person view, not on a cloud somewhere, in his God form, where nothing could touch him. No, he incarnated in a fragile body that was able to get nailed to a cross and beaten up, so that he can give us a way back to him, so that even though it's our fault, even though we deserve the crap that we're doing that we will get. He wanted to make sure that we could still have a way of grace, so we don't have to suffer what we deserve to suffer, so we don't get what's coming to us. And he figured, he did that, and he did it. And remember, he did it trembling at the Garden of Gethsemane, trembling, knowing that I'm about to get wrecked right now. All for what? For people that hate me. For what? For people that don't deserve it. For what? Knowing that he's going to get this number of lashes and this number of cuts and this number of abrasions, knowing all that. No fantasies. No illusions. And he goes right in. Again, he doesn't need us. God doesn't need us. God wants us. He desires us. That's why it's weird when people think about, they say the church is the bride of Jesus. And they say, well, whoa, what's that mean, right? Because you know what married couples do, right? So it's like, well, why? What's that about, right? And then you realize, thinking of Eros, when you see someone in Eros, you look at someone, you become attracted to them. You want to merge with them. You want to be with them. But they're not like you at all. So between men and women, a man looks at a woman and it's beautiful, and then he wants to close the distance. He wants to, couple. And yet that woman has nothing man-like, in the sense that, they're different ways of being there. They got different interests, different things. They're not like each other. They're not friends in that sense. They don't have those similarities. But yet there's this desire to go across that gulf of this similarity, that gap of difference, and to just burn it, just close it, so go right with that person. And that's why that metaphor is used of marriage, of being a bride, because God created us, but then he sees us, and he can't, he's like, it's almost irresistible. Like, he wants to be with us. And yet we do everything to go away.
Well, yes, I think this metaphor came from Judaism, in that Jews are the bride of God.
Yes.
Right. The openly adulterous bride of God, because they would fall into idolatry.
Oh, you say idolatry? Okay. No, it's not idolatrous, because it's reflecting a relationship, not an idol. Marriage isn't an idol, although people they have turned into that. But no, it is, the marriage, in a sense, again, is just a metaphor. It's a way of explaining or describing the way God feels about us and the nature of his relationship to us. And so, remember I said that everything we do in terms of our values is like reflections of his personality, reflections of his character. So almost like fragments of light in different ways. Marriage is like that. It's just another fragment of his character. What? That character of desire, but also of commitment, of selfishness, of saying that, it doesn't matter how many times this happens, but I'm going to keep trying to get you back, and that commitment. And so that's what marriage resembles. It's like, essentially these are like little heavens, in a hell, in the hell world. And I believe that, especially with the coming of America, that each of those little heavens are growing, and that the process of the second coming will be that Jesus will return whenever humans get to a point where they become ameliorated, where they say, I may not like you or whatever, but you being different than me doesn't threaten me. So essentially, in a nutshell, it would be a world where Christ can come back and not be killed again. Because if he came back now, he'd be killed, But, he wants to come back. It's almost like in a way, we have to roll out the red carpet for him. And only at that point, when he returns, does things go from just being ameliorated, being less worse, to actually becoming joyful. That's, better and better and better and better. But the beautiful thing is, when you are in Christ, that better already starts. You don't have to wait till new creation or to the eschaton. You start getting, you start growing that way now. And so it's like, I don't, because, it's like, okay, why do I need to, do all this if I'm going to follow my conscience and end up not in hell anyway? Well, it's like, why would you, why wait? Why wait? Why would you not want to, be a part of that and grow with that and participate,
Mhm.
But that's your
Yes.
free will. You could do however
Yeah.
you like. And like I said, God's not
Yeah.
going to put anyone in a place where they don't belong. Yeah. And
Yes.
as a Muslim, you should know that. Yeah. Like,
Well,
as
I'm
a
not
Muslim, you
actually
know very well.
Muslim.
Oh,
I
you're not? Oh, okay. Is that your picture?
no. It's not my picture. It's just an avatar. But I have written a book about why there should be Sharia for non-Muslims, because it's the only way to restore the patriarchy and restore the practice of marriage. And
So yeah,
it's for practical reasons, really.
yeah. So Europe, because of its I don't want to say intellectual, but it's basically intelligentsia that, where in America, there's a big populist edge that the intelligentsia can't touch. But in Europe, they're more in control. And so they've turned Christianity. You see, it's become so liberal that they've forgotten what's good about it. Like what, because it was, basically so liberal in terms of, okay, you could go your own way in this regard or that regard. But eventually it gets to a point where just there's people forget, like, what's the point of it? And I think this is going to change because in the last several decades, philosophy has basically caught up with Christianity and showing how it is very rational, and there's very good arguments against a lot of the evergreen criticisms of Christianity, and that even Christianity is robust, and that it's actually a much more reliable worldview than other ones. And so this is all, this is only a couple decades old, but this is what the analytic philosophy is showing. And I think that's going to reach Europe eventually. And
What does analytic philosophy show?
That Christianity is a coherent, robust, reliable worldview.
Oh, which analytic philosopher says so?
Well, yeah. So that shift, that revolution, if you will, began in the late 60s, early 70s with people like Richard Swinburne or Alvin Plantinga, or a little later with William Lane Craig. So you have essentially Christianity gaining showing how it's philosophically coherent, and that it makes sense, and that it can be defended in a way that is rational. There we go. So
Okay. I mean, I've never heard it defended rationally.
see, that's what I'm talking about. Is that's the problem. But I believe that that's eventually going to come to Europe, because I see it working here. I mean, it worked through me. I learned all this stuff online from the ministries of apologetics, and so I people are going to look for meaning, and I think as long as you stay genuine, you're going to find eventually. If you want to find God, if you really have in your heart that I want to eventually find, which I did too. When I was in my Eastern religion, I would freaking light some incense, sit in like full lotus posture, and just be like, is this the way to go to God? Is this the way to acknowledge Him? And I remember just being frustrated because I didn't know how. And now the joy of like knowing God and being able to participate and communicate and commune and all that is so wonderful. And I want people to see that, and want people to know that Christianity is a much more reliable, it's a worldview that is going to get you more out of the world. It's going to help you survive the world better. It's going to bring you to your full potential. Problem is that a lot of Christianity, a lot of churches make it, they make it seem like it's not like that. They make it seem like, if you vote wrong, like if you vote for the wrong candidate, you're going to hell. I mean, it's horrible. It's not the way it is at all.
Yes.
I mean,
yes, I suppose it's always been exploited for political purposes.
No, unless that candidate was like, like a Stalin who's running on like, I'm going to kill like 50 million babies. If maybe then you'll go to hell, but just an ordinary life and stuff, like, in terms of like taxes or even socialism, to be so legalistic about it really turns people off. And Christianity is a lot more open-ended than that. It has a lot more room than that,
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we can talk a bit more about that next time.
Thank you. I was pleasantly surprised by the interview and again, I'm sorry about thinking your accent was.
It's not the first time. It's not the first time people have said that. Okay, well, I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Wow,
for
3.5 hours. Wow.
Yes.
Yes. It's 11. It must be like 5 in the morning for you, or 4 in the morning, right?
It's about 3 o'clock.
Oof. All right.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Van. I'll let you go then. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yes. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.